Good morning, everybody. All right, so really, when we looked at what we looked at requirements on day one. We figured out, what the people needed, and we were architecting over the last 2 days. Really, we had architecture of networking architectures. We had cryptographic architectures. We had physical architectures. We're architecting identity management systems. We need to know who's using our stuff. Keep in mind those terminologies of subjects and objects. Right, so the subject, the user wants to do something to an object, and there's got to be something in the middle, security somehow, to ensure this happens properly. And we're not just protecting objects from subjects, we're protecting subjects from objects. I need to keep my kids away from fire and stuff like that. Identity is who you are. Authentication is validating that claimed identity, and we're going to talk a lot about how to authenticate that. And then once I know who you are, I need to control what you do, and our guiding principles are always need to know and least. Oh, let me mute everybody. I'm sorry. During the chat session, I don't mind at all. It's cool. All right. Probably could have put this in the architecture section. I just only recently created this for the CISSP class, and I really liked it. We said that controls are preventive, detective, or responsive. But to the ISO, they categorize things, and well, it's either administrative, it's a soft control, it's a technical thing, or it's a physical thing. But they can overlap. So we have preventive, administrative. Risk avoidance, just don't do it. Don't drive drunk, and you'll avoid that problem. Do background checks before you hire people. Separation of duties, we beat up a number of times. Preventive, technical. Encryption, that's what we mostly think of encryption. It prevents people from reading unauthorized stuff. Even if it's authentication, it prevents unauthorized people from seeing things. Firewalls and passwords. And people tell me, oh, the passwords are so weak. I don't care what they are. Their primary job is to prevent unauthorized access. And they're not always weak. They're very appropriate sometimes. Physical, we have safes. We have locks. And we beat a lot of this stuff up yesterday, right? Physical. Detective, we know rotation of duties can detect our biggest problems. Failure to follow procedures. Again, I don't mean to make light of other people's problems. I know people around the world have some serious problems, much beyond what I have. My problems are mostly caused by me. Again, I think most of my problems would go away if I just went through procedures. I took my daughter to the dentist yesterday, and we were going over dental care, and I don't follow procedures. She said, at least I do the right, if you're only going to brush once, he says, do it at nighttime. So, but I didn't want my daughter to think I was lying. I told her the truth. I said I tried to. I certainly floss all day though, because I get stuff stuck in my teeth, so I floss a lot. Forced vacations. We know that that's a very testable thing, just like they do in banks. It gives people a chance to go over their work. Monitoring, that's a day-to-day looking at things, right? That's an administrative control. To the ISO, that's administrative. We're going to beat that up. Technical, I have intrusion detection systems like IDS, and that could have gone in network. I like it here. That's where they used to have it in their old access control section. So we're going to go over IDS now that we understand packets and stuff like that. It's not like yesterday wasn't long enough. Hashing algorithms, we've done that. Auditing is considered technical to the ISO. So administrative monitoring, day-to-day stuff, technical auditing. See, when you monitor, you're just looking at generic, look at how's it look? What does it look like? But when you're auditing, you're going, okay, these technical metrics, let me go over and see where you map up to these metrics. Right, so it's a much, more technical, defined and understood thing. And physical, we have lights, and we beat these up, closed circuit television, burglar alarms. Response, administratively, how to get people out of the building. Update the policy, tell them they aren't allowed to do that, or from now on they are allowed to do that. Legal actions, we'll sue. Technical, we have, after 3 unsuccessful logins or whatever, we're going to lock the password out. And I'm sure most people, but just in case, watch out, that could be a big denial of service, right? So if you do that, if your policy is after 3 unsuccessful logins, they got to call the help desk, you're going to overwhelm your help desk. And in fact, the attacker might just say, I'm going to try to log in as everybody 3 times. So most people I know have decided to go for an automated, like wait 15 minutes, suspend, and then try it again. So you don't get all those calls to the help desk. Intrusion prevention systems. They were letting you run through, but after they saw all those incomplete 3-way handshakes, they said, nah, that's not right. Keep in mind, though, they wouldn't know that was you. If I were doing a SYN flood, why would I use my real source address? I don't need any traffic back, right? Please keep that in mind. That is a signature, a classic signature of any denial of service attack. If I'm doing a reconnaissance attack, I'm nmapping you and I need to know what OS you're running. I'm trying to figure that out. Of course I got to use my real IP. Well, I mean, there's some ways to trick it around and relay it, or idle scans and stuff like that. But for the most part, I have to use a val. But not a denial of service. You never. That's like robbing a bank and then leaving your card. And if you need the money, I'm over here. Right, so that may show up in your near future. In response physically, after we sensed the overheat, the water sprinklers came out. We gave CPR. We replaced and repaired the item. Really like this slide. I just want to stare at it for a second. No, it says a lot. Our objective is to understand the basics of access control. Now, going over the book, I noticed that they separated the physical controls. So some of the stuff I had yesterday, some of it was here. All the RFID stuff they have in this domain now. So I may move it over. Maybe free up yesterday, because today looks like a shorter day. So it might help me time my slides better. Identity management process, though, I need to know who you are. And that means from the time you first enrolled. So no, we checked the driver's license. When he enrolled for the driver's license, did they check his background? How well did they vet him? So we talked about the problems they had in PKI where they weren't vetting people properly or entities before they were issuing these credentials. But once I know, you get the credential. So you claim, like Bob says, hi, I'm Larry. Or how Bob says, hi, I'm Bob. Prove it. Oh, it puts in his password. That is authenticating the claimed identity. In that case, the password is the credential. And again, once I know what you are, I need to limit what you can do to only the things that you should be able to do for work. Now, again, people are spending 8-10 hours a day at work. Crime prevention through environmental design. Sun Tzu, you want the emotional commitment of the people. Don't be real mean. I think I said it. I always forget how many times I tell these stories, but my Kung Fu teacher sometimes says these very wise things by accident, but we were having a problem. I think it was somebody was abusing the lockers, and one of the kid who really runs the school, I say kid, he's in his 30s. He's been with us since he was 7. He manages a school now, and he says, well, from now on, we're going to tell these kids they can't get lockers. And my teacher says, hey, there's many ways to skin a cat, but let's consider how the cat feels about it. His point was that we're not the only karate school in town, If we're really that mean, they'll find another place. So I mentioned the other day, do traders have to be able to look at CNN? I don't think so, but it made them feel good. And you want your people to like you. But within limits, that's all. You have to review these things. Probably a lot of the biggest problems right now are social networking things. People just don't understand the vulnerabilities associated with these things, from you just making a comment that goes right out of your company like that to clicking on any of these so-called games or whatever that enable stuff to sneak out of your machine. So these are the tough ones. And people can claim, oh, we're not doing that, we're filtering that. My answer is sniff it and make sure. All right, we'll look at common access control problems. So we talked about some of these in architecture, time of check to time of use. But a lot of it is just, imagine, a matter of social engineering. So we talk about what Kevin Mitnick did to Satomu Shimomura, how he was able to hijack his TCP session. But he was also best known as a social engineer. This is how he got the source code to the Motorola ultralight phone. Now, at the time, the most advanced cell phone. And he said he called a phone booth. He found the 800 number from Motorola from a phone booth. He calls that. He says, hi, could you switch me to cellular engineering? Hi, could you tell me who works on the Microtech products? Oh, that's Pam Dillard's group. Pam's on vacation this week. Would you like to speak to Alicia? Sure. And now he's got 2 names. Cellular engineer, hi, is this Alicia? Yes, it is. Alicia, this is Rick. Pam told me you could help me. She mailed him the source code, just like that. He said the entire process took 15 minutes, and that was including waiting on hold. My mother used to tell me that if you put a pen behind your ear and held a clipboard, you could probably walk into most buildings. Well, I checked. You had a pen and a clipboard. That's two-factor authentication. So it's tough. And I'm no better. I am not coming off as the uber security guy. I'm very trickable. You know, I'm the guy that my guitarist can always go, hey, what's that on your shirt? And I look down and he hits me on the nose. You know, I mean, it's just with the finger up the shirt type thing. So we all fall victim. We talked about the controls, prevent, detect, and respond. Nothing new here. The ISO, which most of this test has been in line with since, in my experience, since 2008. You know, again, 27001 came out in 2005, and slowly, quickly maybe. It didn't take off quick in the United States. India adopted it really fast, and then America went to it. So I know our Federal Reserve went to 27001. And finally, they have. So they say everything goes in these three drawers. It's administrative, technical, sometimes technical is called logical, or physical. But NIST doesn't see it that way. We have inconsistent taxonomies. They're not the same thing, only with different words. Technical and logical is, at least that makes it easy. But management is mostly administrative. Or I'd say everything that's management falls into administrative. But administrative controls back here would have included procedures. And to NIST, oh no, procedures are operational day-to-day controls. Oh, where's our physical? Falls under operational. They used to be more in this context. When you took a CISSP test, you had to feel these areas. Probably more ISO, but just in case. And sometimes you have to understand that it's the control and the type of object it's protecting, the asset it's protecting. So a preventive administrative, right? We have a fire drill to prevent damage. It's administrative control, but the asset it protects is physical. So be careful. There's a couple of tricky questions like this, and people tell me, dude, when you're sitting on test day, it is really hard to read a sentence. I got to read it like 5 times. And sometimes I'm like, Bob works in manufacturing for a large corporation. Alice man, why does that guy keep making that noise to me? I shouldn't have eaten that bagel. Now, hold on. Bob works in manufacturing corporation. Oh, man, Gotham was awesome the other day, too. Fish Moody's still got to be alive, though. She's got to be. She fell in the water. Wait, Larry, come on, get back to it. This is how it is. So when you see these sentences, preventive, administrative, just remember the last word is the asset. All right, we don't want to have a fortress mentality. A fortress mentality is when you put all your security controls at the perimeter, but you're nothing inside. And it's commonly nicknamed to be hard and crunchy on the outside, but soft and chewy on the inside. I'll show you something pretty cool here. I'm going to turn on my camera for a second. You guys know this symbol, martial arts symbol, right? It's the opposite of that. This means I am hard on the inside, but I'm very soft and gentle on the outside. And a lot of people outside the scope of this test, I would think, would tell you to turn your firewalls off, hard in the middle. I wouldn't expect it on the test, but many people are saying that now. Forget those things. We're being hard and crunchy all over. On your test, and certainly you want to have the options depending on the risk. You do your risk assessment. You want to have the options to have defense in depth. Again, to put milk in the refrigerator, I'm not going to do that. But so we have policies, our administrative controls, firewalls, and IDSs and IPSs, and routers and switches, and the application sometimes has its own controls. Sometimes you load an app and it has to enter in you create usernames and passwords right inside the app. Some of them integrate to your directory, right? Which is better? You will review the native controls. You don't know what's better. Some apps are awful. Some of them might have something that you didn't wasn't available in the directory. So again, the wise information architect always reviews the native controls, and I'm saying that because it could be important in your near future. Middleware. This is in our 3-tier database design, where originally we have, Bob has a computer and he keeps the data there. It's on a disk there, and Alice wants to look it up, so he has to get off the computer. But then we separated. We put the data on a disk and put that on the network, and then we put terminals out for people to look it up. But then if you move data from one disk to another, you got to update every terminal, every view. So we came up, and actually Sun, it became an ISO standard, the ANSI Spark model, where you have a 3-tier database design. You have this schema, a logical schema in the middle, and this is what we think of when we think of SQL. It's classic middleware. Right. Well, we have access controls there. And I remember when SQL didn't integrate real well to Active Directory. The operating system, we've covered a number of that in architecture. And you have hardware stuff. You can have cable locks. You have firmware passwords. So we already said this, really. I think that one slide I have could help me. Maybe I should delete all this stuff. I do want to point out that, and it's going to be part of today. I think I said it, but exercising. Exercising is what you do to people. So when we created, say, a business continuity disaster recovery test, I want to make sure our plan, I create a plan. This is how it's going to work. Technically, I want to make sure the plan actually works. Will we have enough time? Does the SCSI adapter really move our data that fast? Is it possible to work? Once the plan is working, then I get people to follow it. Let me see you do it. Let me see you do it. Let me see you do it. I'm exercising these people so they know how to follow the plan. So always remember, exercising is an administrative control to assure your people know how to do the plan. Technically, though, you test the plan. Because whether or not the SCSI controllers can really restore data that fast, that's a technical thing. It's not Bob's fault. Traffic shaping isn't probably testable yet, but we looked at this with DSCP. What Cisco calls quality of service or type of service. Actually, Cisco does type of service. Some people say quality, but it should be DSCP now. And if you're worried about ICMP taking up too much of your traffic, you're allowed to throttle how much is allowed to go through. But most people don't do it. And we got to get better again. It was one of the lessons of the Titanic. We have to prioritize traffic. Physical controls we beat up all yesterday. Nothing new here. But I do like to use cabling to keep us in mind of that cost-benefit analysis. We're not trying to get the most secure cable. We're trying to get the most appropriate. And that's with all of our security controls. Comparing ISO and NIST categories again. Most of your tests should be in ISO. But if you see a NIST thing, do remember that operational controls include procedures and physical. Yeah, we have inconsistent taxonomies. There are gray areas. I don't know why the smart card is considered physical, the memory card is physical, but the smart card is considered technical when I look it up. I do know that most people don't know what it does for us. So one more time, I want to check, because one of my pet peeves in life, in security, forget the test. What does a smart card do that a memory card can't? What attack works against your ATMs but not against your CACS? It's not two-factor. We're still getting two-factor, the card and the pen. Mutual authentication. That's why you can't skim on a CAC. IPsec, again, provides system mutual authentication. We have to get it, or else it's really, really easy to set up rogue infrastructure. Let me show you one of my favorite rogue infrastructure device. For those of you who may not have seen this, hold on. Anybody here using portable apps like I do? Makes it so much easier to move from machine to machine. Pwn, Express, PowerPwn. I want the power. There's PowerPwn. This guy looks like a standard surge protector, and it does work. It also has a full version of basically Kali Linux on it. It also has a GSM, Wi-Fi, Ethernet adapters, so it can sniff your Wi-Fi, automatically try to crack the keys, and send all that data over GSM to someone else's phone. Why not throw a router in here? and it can do anything you want to an IP6 network. And the only way to fix those problems is with mutual authentication. The only way to fix rogue infrastructure, the only way to stop people from connecting to a phony access point when they thought they were at Starbucks is to have mutual authentication. And the way we're probably going to have to do this, it makes sense to me, after we, strengthen it, is through PKI. I don't know of a better way that we're going to, it's kind of like the New World Order. Some people get all upset, but we got to have something. If we don't all agree that red light means stop and green light means go, we can't share the road. And I want to share this road. I love it. I love this road. I don't want to go back to simpler times. Shoot, I'm always the guy who's waiting for more stuff. Where's our high-speed rail? Why can't I get from Tampa to Miami in a couple hours? It's crazy. But the most important thing to business is that you don't overtax them. Again, this is my trick. Don't be like TSA. Don't make me take through more controls and unlock all these doors if what I'm getting is milk. We always have to make it appropriate to the level of risk. Now, preventive, detective, and response is what we typically think of. But again, the most important thing from a governance perspective, if you're really leading, is to provide direction. I saw a thing on TED Talks recently. If you get in front of I forget how I worded it, I'll think of it, a Philly guy. If you get in front of the subway in Philly, a bunch of people headed to an Eagles game, and you go, come on, let's go see the Eagles. That's not a leader. They were already going that way. A leader is a guy who can get people to change directions. And hopefully we're going to change people's direction to make them more secure, right? So we're going to provide direction. Prevent, detect. And we know that if somebody knows they're on camera, this detective control will act as a deterrent. I know that dog's there, even if it's not this vicious looking. A Chihuahua can be a deterrent because it just makes so damn much noise, right? Now, there's two ways to respond. I have to address the root cause, and I have to recover the lost asset. Corrective, again, deals with the insufficient access control. How did this happen? We weren't encrypting passwords. We got to start doing that. Correct that. We weren't locking the door. Oh, you got to lock the door from now on. Recovery, get back what was stolen. And compensating are our business continuity plans. The donut tire. Doesn't have the same service level, but it'll get me there. Now, getting more complex again in these sentences, I said a fire drill was preventive. But if you gave me the choice, I would say it's directive. And I underscore this because Sean Harris wrote the best books, I think, to this. But she didn't include directive controls the last time I read. But the IC2 did. So I think that's a really cool thing to consider. Again, directive controls is steering, governance. Here's a neat one. Detective technical physical control. So this is a detective control that technically works to protect a physical asset. Tracing software. And most of my students never know what it is. But I had a guy from the neighborhood show up in the recording studio. Hey, Granny, how you doing, man? Hey, you still fixing computers? My friends think I fix computers. Anyway, hey, you want some laptops, man? Anybody want some IBM ThinkPads? I got $200. The only thing is you can't never hook these up to the internet, all right? Yeah, they got some kind of tracing software. It's like a LoJack for a friggin' computer. He knew what it was. And I got to put my fingers over my ears. Oh, come on, I'm not hearing this. Anyway, preventive, physical. So this is a physical thing, protecting a physical thing. It's a lock. Directive controls. I can set management, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to set directive, right? We already talked about policies and stuff. And we do it based on business objectives. Again, our job is not to like make people the most secure. We're trying to help people sell their Coca-Cola, whatever it is they make, whatever it is they do. Everybody produces a product or a service. Unless you're in my family, then a lot of my family just leeches off of other people. It's our inventing. I get calls from people who love me so much. Could you help me out? Anyway, we want to reduce the risks, right? So if I'm driving, I say I want to reduce the risk of getting in an accident. I want to reduce the risk of getting a flat. I want to reduce the risk of getting lost. I want to reduce the risk of spending too much money on gas. I know the gas is cheaper in Delaware than it is in the PA, so I generally try to time it like that. Direct, I have to figure out again, what's the business want to do? We talked about that prudent man or reasonable person. That's how you'll be held accountable in court, right? Oh, you're Coca-Cola? How come Pepsi does it this way? They never had a problem. What are the applicable laws? What are the best practices? Policy, standards, all of this stuff. Data classification, categorization tells me, again, how I should deal with this. It provides direction. Dude, remember, that's top secret. You're going to have to shred that, burn it, whatever. You guys at Spaywar have given me some declassified, shredded secret data. And the guy said, now, that's how you know it's secret. Because if it was top secret, I had to burn it too. I had a challenge coin from you guys too, and I had at the time 16 challenge coins. It's a great honor. My mom, when she was alive, used to be so proud of me. She used to call them medals and stuff. And I had it with me in Shark Fest one year, and someone broke into my car and stole my bag. That was my bag. I wasn't worried about the laptops or anything. I was just like, oh, my coins. I have pictures of it. I could show you. I do have at least pictures of it. Did take pictures of all of them. So. All right. So again, classification, we think of hierarchies. That allows us to implement least privilege. See, categorization, just because you have secret clearance to engineering doesn't mean you need it to payroll. So all these provide direction. Training, awareness, education. You know what? I don't take them out anymore. I just went looking to see if I had another Spaywar. I'm sorry if I didn't remember, but I have all these. I think I pulled out like 12 more, but no Spaywar ones. Yeah, it is really cool. I just got one from, it was really nice, from the FBI in Hawaii. Edward, thank you. All right, well, we talked about this. When you give people a resource, you have to tell them what they can and cannot do with it. And most testable is the consequence of non-compliance. So again, in a policy, the most important elements are compliance issues, and probably most testable, the consequence of non-compliance. Preventive administration, we had this, I got to pull that out. Preventive technical, yeah, all these things can come out. We talked about the man trap, right? Yeah, we don't need to do this. Detective controls, detective administration, rotation of duties, hashing algorithm, cameras, covered all of this. Response controls, covered all that. Yeah, that one slide covers a lot of stuff. That'd be nice. And I normally only go here till break. So let's see how, oh man, we got 25 minutes to go. Sweet. That normally takes me an hour. All right. Well, for those of you in the service, nothing else. Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't join the service. I was, at the time, I was very worried that a Leon Spinks type of incident could have happened. So I was a brawler, a thug when I was a kid, and Leon Spinks. It was, I knew Leon. Leon and Michael Spinks used to train at Fraser's gym, and when he came out of the Olympics, and he slugged his sergeant and had to repeat basic training over, and I just had a feeling something could go down with me. But now it's been such an honor, especially all the branches of service I've gotten to work with, and it's great. But for some reason, because my teacher, my martial arts coach, Joe Lewis, was a Marine. I love it when I work for the Marines. I don't know. I know my mom did, and everybody. My mom loved it when I was, again, any branch of service, but for some reason, Marines just, like I said, it's probably because of Joe. All right, so we're done through the introduction. What is access control and identity management? Now we're going to get detailed on how we authenticate. Bob claims to be Bob, says he's Bob. Authentication is to validate that claim, and we need something to give credit to that claim. And there are three types of credentials we generally think of. Something you know, something you have. What's the last one? So many people say that, but the most common biometric is my signature. That's not what I are. It's what I do. My iris is strictly what I am. I cannot focus and change it, Larry. I can change my signature at will. My voice is a hybrid. Now, biometric, it comes from the Greek. Bio means life, metric to measure. We're going to measure something about your life. Now, if it's something I do, and I can change it, so it's very dynamic. But if I can't change my iris, it's very static. You might want to remember those terms. So the more a biometric is what you do, the more dynamic it is. So my voice is a hybrid. My voice is the shape of my body. I can't imitate certain voices. I can't do I can't imitate a dolphin. I can't imitate even most women. I can imitate a lot of men. I can't imitate any women. They all sound like something out of a Monty Python movie. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. So I can change it within limits. And it's also changed over my life. My eye hasn't changed much over my life. My finger may have gotten bigger, but the actual shape of the print hasn't changed much. So the more it is what you are, the more static it is. All right. Identification is when a claim is made. And I told you this is an English test. It's an English test. So these words, Bob is a claimant. Bob claims to be Bob. Authentication is when you validate it. You don't sign a card and ask for ID. I did that, and post office. They want it signed. This card isn't signed. I can't accept it. Really? She goes, I'm sorry. So I take a pen and I sign it, and she goes, okay, and then I wipe it off with my thumb, like to be a wise guy, to show her, see, I don't have to listen. I don't know why I gave this lady a hard time. She's just doing her job. But I was just kind of annoyed. It's like, this is silly security. The other silly security thing that bothered me, I had a kid working for me. He's 20. We go to a grocery store in Virginia, and I pick up a bottle of wine. And the lady goes, is he 21? I said, no, but I am. She goes, yeah, but he's in line with you. I can't sell it to you. I said, you're kidding me. I said, I'll just go out and go in another line. She goes, no, you have to go. You have to leave the store. And I was, really? No, I don't. And I walked over to another line, bought the thing. I mean, like, I don't know if it was the next station, 2 stations over, paid for it. I told him, the kid, I said, you stay there. And then when he waited, when I was done, I walked over and I had to give her like a wise guy look, like, see, I told you I didn't have to go out. But that's not nice. I didn't really have to do that. All right. So again, authentication is to validate the claimed identity, to give credit. And we know that cred means to believe. Mutual authentication, keep beating that one, is when you validate both ends, the way we knew to do as children. Hi, this is Larry. Who may I ask is calling? We knew that. We just forgot. Probably a dangerous shortcut. And this would mitigate the Pony Express things I just showed you, that I said could be anything. It could be a Wi-Fi. It has an automatic evil twin thing, so you one-click evil twin. So it'll become a rogue access point just like that. One click. And again, if I get a rogue router and I get you to go to the internet through me, now I can be a man in the middle and watch everything in the middle. Authentication types on a test, type 1, 2, and 3, and they could be referenced that way respectively. Type 1. What is type 1? You need to know. That's something you know. Type 4 is probably not testable. It's something I read in a white paper from RSA, and I love it though, because it is really how things go. The only reason, like, Kirk trusts the certificate is because it was signed by, Flanagan from the Intrepid. It's someone you know. When you guys pass your test, that's not going to mean you're going to get a raise or a job or a transfer. Someone you know could probably help you with that. And I have this, it's not what you know, but who, because we used to have a very politically incorrect thing in the neighborhood saying the only way to get out of Logan, or the major ways to get out of Logan, North Philly, was to either join the service or get some girl pregnant whose dad's in the union. He's going to hook you up. We'll get you a job. And a buddy of mine did just that. So I was making $235 washing dishes, and he made $650 as a Teamster. And he came on the corner wearing a 3-piece suit. See, Greenie, Mr. Smarty Pants, it ain't what you know, it's who you know. Whatever. All right, type 1 authentication. And I want to watch my time because this gets very technical, and I don't want to. We got good time. All right. A password is a key. So if symmetric encryption is good, what's wrong with passwords? Well, we talked about entropy. When I type in a character on a computer, when I type in a letter, it's stored in 8 bits, at least 8 bits. That's a byte. We have decided, we said earlier that with 8 bits, I have an entropy of 2 to the 8th or 256. There are 256 possible guesses that the attacker would have to face when he's trying to guess the character. But if you just wrote in alpha text, that's not true. He's only got 26 characters. All right, I went upper and lower. That's 52. Upper, lower, numeric, special characters. The entire ASCII key set was written for 7 bits, not 8. So even if you were, and there's non-printable ASCII characters, not too many people put line feed or carriage return in their password. You can get it in there if the system supports it. So, and there's extended ASCII. IBM, so back to the DES days. Remember when we said in DES you had 8 bits for something, it was really 7, 1 bit was parity. That's how all things were written on the computer. But IBM decided not to have a parity bit there. They actually dedicated a separate pin, a separate chip. So you actually had 8 bits for characters. So they created extended ASCII, and that's when you see like happy faces and stuff. And there would be extended ASCII character set 128 through 255. So and I can type that in by using my number pad and just saying Alt 128, and I get this extended ASCII 128. So it's 1997, and I'm about to teach my first class at Icon. Mike, there was Marco, are you there? I want to find this instructor. He's the guy who taught me to do this password. Marco's not there. Got to find this guy, Mike. He's awesome. Really, really funny, goofy guy, too. Never took a serious picture in his life. His driver's license. Well, he taught me this thing, and he said, dude, if you want to make a strong password, use upper, lower, numeric, special characters, extended ASCII. But he said, if you go at the end of the word and put in ASCII code Alt 255, it's a space. And even if somebody were to like sniff it out with something, they might not notice that they saw a space. They would just type in the other characters. So I was teaching for a company called Icon, and I made the password EYE ampersand K0N, and then I hold down Alt, and I put in 255, and then my password is not EYE ampersand K0N. There's actually a space at the end, Alt 255. All right, so now I'm about to teach, I start the class, and it's NT Workstation 351. And a guy says on Wednesday, Dan, what's your password? Excuse me? Did you ever see Lovecrack? No. He'd been running Lovecrack. He said, I had everybody's password Monday morning by like 10 o'clock. He said, mine was the only one he couldn't guess. Guys, that's a good password. I would write that down. I use that for everything. That's what I do for my bank. Nobody guesses this password. It's so cool. No, I'm not. But I do stuff like this. I try to get more entropy. All right, so I told you I was going to tell you about Megumi cracking passwords. Megumi, after I go to WPA2, and I told you I couldn't sniff my nephew's. You must sniff out EAPOL four-way handshake. Oh, okay. So then we're talking about it, and she said, I said, wow, that's much better. She goes, I crack a WPA2 an average of 3.5 minutes. No, you mean web. No WPA2, laddie-son. Now, WPA2 uses AES encryption. It's clear to TS in some cases. AES very strong, laddie-son. Do you understand entropy? Yeah, I understand entropy. If passphrase, actually went way more technical than this, but if passphrase not a random number, entropy greatly reduce. I don't know too many people use random numbers for their passphrases. That's not a random number. I was teaching I got to teach the very first CEH version 7 and version 8. But for version 7, I was very nervous. They made all these big changes. And they picked me to do it out in DC. And I just invite all my friends. People who are smarter than me are going to help me learn this stuff and not pick on me. So Megumi comes out. She teaches a good deal of the wireless section. And the passphrase for this company was this. She guessed it in 8 seconds using earcrack NG. I said, whoa, Megumi, how did you get it so good? Simple dictionary attack, Larry-san. Well, that's not a dictionary word. I use your website for dictionary. Oh, that's good. Upper and lower case throw you off at all? Tell them most people must use upper and lower. They will use first letter. A first word will be uppercase. That's all. And the numbers. Tell them most people must use a number. They will put 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the end. Very, very simple. Still seemed awfully fast. I said, Megumi, what are you using to crack this? Are you uploading this to Amazon Cloud? I've heard about people doing that. Amazon Cloud very fast, Larry-san, but share too many customer, I worry. So China make a GPU card. GPU can get 4 GPUs on the one card. I can get 8 cards in my system. 32 GPUs somehow very fast. She did it with 32 GPUs in her home system. Somehow very fast. It's so awesome. Marines made me contact her and figure out how she did that, how to put together the GPUs. It was pretty cool. Anyway, they didn't make me. I mean, they asked me to, and I was very happy to do it. It makes me look good to know smart people. All right, there are technical problems, ASCII limitations. So another problem with passwords is that people write them down. Right, so because they didn't remember it. It's a lot of stuff to remember. So people on a test will argue that passphrases are much better. Passphrases can give you the same entropy as a password system, but they're easier to remember. I can get the same entropy because I just made it longer, rather than give me more characters per set. I just extend out the number of characters. Maybe Bruce Schneier argues passphrases aren't. He says it's like playing Wheel of Fortune. You get far less entropy, but I don't know. I mean, not all passphrase systems. He likes something called diceware. In fact, Charlene, my girlfriend, is a ISO 27001 auditor. Back when she was doing that type of work, she actually accredited the only passphrase system she would do is the diceware. There are other problems. People share them, and probably the worst problem, people reuse them. So if you want to get somebody's strong password, offer something for free on the internet, require strong passwords, and they will probably put their favorite strong password. Another thing I want you to keep in mind about passphrases, actually 2 things. Just like passwords, they should be hashed, right? When they hash the passphrase, get ready for a pen or whatever, that hash is called the virtual password. So in your near future, you may see something like, in a passphrase system, what is actually used to authenticate the subject? And the answer would be the virtual password. It's a hash. Also, remember, when we're doing internet standards, ISO standards, passwords will go frequently over CHAP, but passphrases go over EAP or EAP over LANs or something. We have EAP TLS to encrypt it. There's all kinds of versions of EAP. Cisco has their lightweight version, LEAP. Cisco has their one that works with PKI, PEEP, protected. All right, so but it's all versions of EAP. Please remember EAP. There's EAPOL. There is EAP TLS to work with PKI. There's Cisco's LEAP and Cisco's PEAP. These are all versions of EAP. And since they don't require that you just do passwords, any system you're doing that does 2-factor authentication that's an internet standard is probably based on EAP today. All right, so please, people tell me, again, it's one of the more common questions I get after someone missed the test. I got a lot of questions on EAP. Did we cover that? Brute force or dictionary attacks, I'm looking for subsets. But again, it's not just Webster's. Megumi used the website of the company. Well, since that time, that was 2010, I've had a lot of red team guys in my class, and we've discussed it. And one guy said, dude, if I wanted to break into you, I would find you on Facebook. I'd find you on LinkedIn. I'd find your favorite books, your favorite movies, your favorite music, and I'd create word lists from these. And I was like, and you would probably have me. I need to change everything from Star Trek. Of course, I do my little thing. So, like, Megumi looked at my password. Again, it was EYE ampersand K0N, all 255. Now, should be a K in there. But let's just look at this. She goes, first of all, Larry-san, EYE, already a word. And so sorry, Larry-san, but you are not the only person to think number 0 instead of letter 0. Really? I thought I made that up. I thought that was me. Yeah, I was totally impressed. So Johnson said, scary. I was like, baby, you had me at entropy. Anyway, a hybrid attack would be just that. A hybrid attack is, all right, now after my dictionary, let me see, did he use number O instead of letter O? And you try to do something like, do I know something about the subject? Do I, so they can really target it. Type 2 is something you have. And you could have anything, and it would be called a token. But when I'm taking an IT test, and I see token, or a token device, they're talking about one-time password generators. There are 2 types. Many of you may have a secure ID, RSA, and it has no keypad on it, so I know it's asynchronous. Synchronous token devices can generate the same pseudo-random nonce because they're seeding it with the same seed at the time of day. Of course, there's other seeds. It's going to be like this, the serial number of the unit, and it has to work with your PIN. Asynchronous, though, will use a challenge response. They're going to ask you to enter in your PIN. They're going to challenge you. Enter in your PIN. Your PIN is the response. And you can tell by looking at an asynchronous token device has a keypad. Either of these, though, the value are the same. What do they mitigate? What attack is so common in authentication that a one-time password would mitigate? Think of how CHAP works, right? When they challenge you, they say, take this number and add it to your password. And that number had to be random, and that mitigated replay attacks. The value of the token device, or a one-time password, is that if it is captured by an intruder, it cannot be reused. It's an odd phrasing, but that's how I understand my Comanche. We talked about PKI and smart cards and memory cards. Type 3, something you are or do, and I said that you can only speak matter-of-factly about what you measure. You can't measure everything. In fact, if you measure too much about, say this is my thumb, and I scratch my thumb, you go, that's not Larry. No, Larry didn't have a scratch there. A type 1 error, or a false reject, very testable as both terms, is a vulnerability caused by measuring too much detail because the system is too sensitive. So you back off on the level of detail. Hey, he's got a thumb. That must be Larry. It's not enough detail. You got to find the right amount. Now, in operation, everybody I know has a zero tolerance for a type 2. They'd much rather have type 1s. I'd rather have Bob, the valid user, stuck in the parking lot than Eve, the evil intruder, in the building. However, that's not how they rate them. When you buy them, they were in a lab and they tuned it to where the number of type 2s and type 1s and type 2s are the same. Oh, we're getting too many type 1s, back off the level of detail. Oh, too many type 2s, make it. Okay, we just got 4 and 4. That's a crossover error rate. The lower the CER, the more accurate the system. Try getting a fingerprint on a mechanic. The choice to go from fingerprint reader to iris scan reader is not probably because iris scans are more unique. Iris scans are unique to 1 in 3 trillion, and fingerprints are only unique to 1 in 300 billion. There's only 6 or 7 billion people on Earth. That's not the issue. The issue is usability. It's operational issues. So I had a guy who designed the system for the helicopter mechanics at the White House. And he said we could not use fingerprints. I had to go to iris scans. Hacking concerns people in movies, and it has worked. They hack the reader. They get a phony fingerprint. They get a phony iris. They get contact lenses. And it has worked, but even if you made the reader perfect, you got all your digital problems. They don't send your eye over there. They send ones and zeros. So all the problems we have of sniffing and replay attacks could still happen. All right, some biometrics are strictly what you are. Some are strictly what you do, and your voice is a hybrid. Now, there's a lot of things that I've seen in books. I haven't heard they beat it up. Is it hand topology? Is it hand geometry? There's all they've done keyboard dynamics. They can tell who you are by how you type. In fact, that was way back to World War II. They could tell what operators were operating the telegraph machines by their signature. But we're going to focus right now, before we take a break, on the difference between the iris and the retina. So again, it's our closed circuit television. You got the lens, and then we have an iris that controls how much light goes through it. That's the color part of your eye. I can see that in the crowd. The retina, the blood vessels in the back, the imager. Well, you have to put your eye up against a reader. That's a little gross. I don't know how the hygiene of that, but it also reveals stuff about you. Like it's a blood vessel, so they can tell, if you had hepatitis. A woman she got a false reject because she was pregnant, and she found out she was pregnant from security, and that's not a cool thing for most people. So please know, they apparently hit it, that the iris is one of the most accepted, and the retina is the least accepted biometric type. One last thing on signature. If you're a good artist, you could copy my static signature. But it is a lot harder to figure out how long did Larry normally take to do that. So I said we consider time. We like to look at the fourth dimension and consider that. The fourth dimension. So that's a lot harder to spoof. Oh, you took way too long. And it's of time. How much pressure did you put on the pen at various points? So you may see something in your near future about a dynamic signature holds more information about the subject. All right, so far so good? Doing okay this morning? Ready for our first break? All righty then. Let's take a break, get back at 10:15. Does that work for everybody? All right, back. Hello, hello. Let me know you're back. There we go. I'm back. Awesome. I noticed that my graphic had gotten lost there. Cool. That's my hand at my bank. I had a hand scanner, and I asked him about it. And I said, "Do you ever get any type 1 errors?" "Oh, absolutely. Biggest cause is the hand scanner is a ring." She said, "Because what happens is, if you scan it with a ring, you have to have the ring on. But the problem is, people think, well, maybe I won't have my ring all the time. I'll scan it without it." And they take the ring off their finger just as they're being, registered, enrolled. The term on your test is enrolled. When you enroll with it. So if you take your ring off just then, your finger looks the way it would if somebody had just removed a ring. So they said, if you normally wear a ring, scan it with the ring. And if you forget your ring, just go talk to somebody. And that's an important thing. I told you yesterday, if you have a biometric reader and it fails, and remember, we always have to have control failure policies. What will we do when the control doesn't work? And the backup for this should be a human. Call security. I said, "You ever had any type 2s? She said, "Not that we know of." All right, type 4 authentication, not a common term. Probably not testable, but it's the way PGP works, that web of trust. Now, I've been calling it PGP. The truth is, PGP was freeware. Then Phil Zimmerman sold the company, and it became payware. But the technology itself is still available to you. It's an open source program, so you can get it as GPG, GNU's Privacy Guard. That's freeware. And either of these two together fall under Open PGP. It's just fewer keystrokes to PGP. Now, anytime you were architecting a solution for remote access, I told you to please do two-factor authentication. Passwords aren't enough. I can't see your face. I don't know that's not you. It could be any two factors, but typically we think of type 1 and type 2. And even though biometrics considered like the fiber optic of authentication, it's not as strong as any two. So type 1 and type 2 together is considered better than type 3. All right, now we know it's Bob, or at least we feel reasonably assured that is Bob. What can Bob do? Only what he needs to do with the least amount of privileges required. But that's a lot easier said than done. So I talked about you install an app and they get all these different rights that people have, and you hope you can tune it and tweak it down, but it's not always easy. I had somebody tell me that it's pretty cool because it's especially hard sometimes in the shared directory. So say maybe you have the S drive, and underneath S is all these different shared folders. Now, everybody has file scan at the root of S, but underneath HR, you should have just granted HR privileges. But if you didn't remove or block the inherited rights, people would have inherited anyway. So rather than try and lock all this down because it gets tedious, guy told me he puts in honey files, and it'd be like called payroll.txt, and someone tries to open, there's nothing in it, they just see you try to access it, and then they come over to you, dude, why are you trying to open up that file? Oh, I'm just clicking around 100 times in the span of 5 minutes. Oh. So our objective is to just create privileges or entitlements or capabilities, they may call it, to enable my employees to get their job done. And it's a lot easier to do that if I figure out what they do for a living. All right, well, he's a salesman. All right, let me figure out what salespeople do. When the Orange Book came out and said you got to be able to control what people do, they never said you had to group people together. When the Orange Book came out, they never said, and you got to be able to have a centralized domain controller where you do all the account administration on one machine. No, you could go and administer everything on each individual machine, the workgroup model. So we had two Orange Books specs. We had DAC and MAC. All the things I know that got Orange Book certified, Novell, Microsoft, Banyan, they all allowed you to have role-based access control. They had groups you can create. It wasn't a requirement, but they did it. They went above and beyond. They also had the ability to have a centralized domain controller. So those are also two important considerations. We're not going to necessarily go to MAC, but we're going to take our DAC models and make them role-based and centrally managed. If I gave rights to Bob, it's really hard to control that. You know, I wish Marco was here because he also taught NT351 at Icon with me. And one of the things we had to teach people is just absolutely awful. A user at the, you know, after years of working there might have rights to thousands, let's say 10,000 different objects, folders and files and stuff, right? I mean, all the files in one program directory. It's still, it could be hundreds of them. All right, so now he's going to leave. He's leaving the company, and man, I got to create a new user that would have the exact same rights. And Microsoft, it was a test objective. Rename the account to Alice. That's a horrible thing to do. You would lose all accountability. So we knew, you know, we would tell people, oh, you might want to do that to pass your Microsoft test. But no, why did he need access to 10,000 of those things? Well, all but one of them was because he was a salesman. His home directory, though, that was because he was Bob. Then I'm just going to create a role called sales, and I will give all capabilities or privileges, entitlements to the roles. And in fact, Marco and I were doing work. That was one thing we were never to do. We were never to give anybody explicit access control other than their home directory. Every other thing you got rights to, you got rights because you were a member of a group. And you can nest roles inside of roles. Right, so just like the domain admins group is added to the local administrators group when you join a domain. So that happens a lot. So we prefer to do role-based implicit control, not explicit. It could be because you're authorized to use it while you're in this building. You know, I don't want people accessing that printer when they're not even in this building or something like that. Time of day. I don't let any logins between whatever 10 and 2. Or there's no business case to do a long-distance phone call after 6. We disable that. It could be the type of transaction. Are you reading or are you writing? Is it a check for less than 1,000? Right? You can get to my entire website as anonymous. If you're reading, I don't think you can write to it over port 80 that I know of. Operating system policies are reference monitors. We talked about these. So the TCSEC had two basic ones. DAC we know uses ACLs, MAC uses labels. Somebody decided to create a new term at NIST called non-discretionary. It's not an Orange Book thing. Non-discretionary used to show up on the test. I don't know if they do anymore. But non-discretionary inferred two things. We took our DAC models and we added role-based access control and we added centralized management. And just a refresher, a discretionary allows the owner. When you create a file, you're the owner. You're allowed to modify that ACL. And it only required that you did it based on the user ID, but we'd prefer to do roles. And every machine could maintain its own database, but we prefer to have it centrally managed. This would be an explicit access control matrix. Get used to this picture. An access control matrix is a table with rows and columns. The rows are associated with subjects and define the subject's capability. Please remember that. Capabilities. The columns are associated with the object and define the access control list. Nice. If this were an implicit, I wouldn't say Bob or Alice or Ted. I would say like sales, engineering, payroll. Mandatory are Bella Padula for the most part. Labeled security. Subjects are assigned clearances and category sets, and that's on your user label. I would remember a category set. And I'll tell you something very scary about it. Well, maybe just aware about it. There was a virus went out, CISSP pot, and let's see, I don't want to go down too far, but CISSP pot was going on for a number of years. We didn't know how bad it was. I could seal pins, smart cards. Here we go. The CACS. What CISSP pot turned out to do, and we've been going on since 2006 or so, and we didn't realize how bad it was till 2012. Has two pieces of malware. One is a reverse shell. So you get a C prompt, right? So you click on, by the way, this spread based on a PDF exploit. So the Adobe exploit that a number of things have happened. So now clicking on it, all you had to do is click on some PDF file, and you got they got a reverse shell. They can have a C prompt that's in the context used. But it had another thing. It had a DLL that's able to query your CAC. Now at the time, for many years, NipperNet was available on the internet. Not SIPRNet, but NipperNet. And when you plug your CAC in, you had a reader there, and when you plug your CAC in, you're able to see the stuff that you're cleared to see. And when you have clearance, whatever TS clearance, it's not everywhere. You TS clearance to various sites. You might even have secret clearance to other places, just because you have 2S in general. And these different things that you have access to are known as your category set, stored on your card. When you plugged your card in, CISSP pot immediately queried your card, found out your category set, and attempted to download everything. And because of this, people tell me just assume everything from secret and below is likely compromised. Objects are assigned classifications and compartments, and then we map this in this crisscross framework. And we already talked about classifications, least privilege, compartments, need to know. I have need to share here. I want to be it's not testable, but I've had people from DIA tell me that they, after 9/11, we were concerned about the agencies not sharing information effectively. Need to know is associated with an outsider saying, hey, I need to see that, and he has to prove a validated need to know. Need to share is maybe you're the CIA and you look at something and you go, wow, I should share this with the NSA. And you need to prove that. And maybe we'll share information more effectively there. It's really a mess. I'm sure you guys who work there know much better than I do. We know these labels contain Bella Padgel for confidentiality. So we have top secret for grave loss of life, secret serious, confidential some damages. Then we had unclassified. But after the Freedom of Information Act, can I see it? No, but it's unclassified. Good, kind of, sort of. On your test, I understand they only want SBO, sensitive but unclassified, but different agencies use different terms. My Army guys have been using for official use only. They said we are nowhere looking at even changing that. So I don't know. DIA would like it to. Right, so just because I needed secret clearance to Treasury doesn't mean I needed secret to engineering, so I'm compartmentalized out of there. Non-discretionary required role-based access control requires and centralized, and it makes it a lot easier to administer. Sure. This is an implicit access control. Remember, it's an English test. Explicit, I said Bob. I had to identify Bob. Implicit, I just decided to the role. I have to administer this, and I like to have a single consoles to go to. The number one call to the help desk is associated with access, passwords. Single sign-on will reduce a lot of that. Single sign-on can reduce administration at the cost of making you less secure, because now somebody just has to get the right credential and they're all the way in. So you do a risk assessment and determine what works best for you. Actually, my guys tell me who do a lot of this, there's no such thing as single, Larry. We've got the reduced. So, now, Kerberos is an authentication server. Actually, who's Kerberos in mythology? Kerberos in mythology come from the Greek. Three-headed dog. Why would they pick a three-headed dog to represent an authentication server? My understanding is it was supposed to be an authentication, authorization, and accounting server. Yeah, you can guard the gate, but why? Not to hell, to Hades. It's a little different than there. I picture Kirk and Scotty. It's supposed to be a AAA server. Scotty, where are we on Kerberos? Captain, I've got the authentication working fine. I just started the authorization. I haven't even looked at the accounting yet, sir. It's gotta go now. And they released Kerberos. And Kerberos is actually an A.5 server. It can authenticate. It authenticates symmetrically, but other than the scalability of symmetric versus asymmetric stuff, seems to be fine. It does a very limited form of authorization. It can say yes or no. It can't say, well, you can read, but you can't write. But it does do something pretty cool, and you'll need to know it. When you are authorized to use that resource, if you say you log into the Kerberos domain, you get your ticket grant ticket, and you go, hey, can I print to this printer? And they go, let me see, are you allowed to? Yes. And you go to print, they can encrypt that channel. And that's really cool. Well, they do that at layer 4. That's an encrypted channel between you and the app. It's kind of like an SSL type thing. Sesame is a European. I don't know if they ask any questions on it anymore. If they do, it's maybe 1 or 2. It scales better than Kerberos because of the asymmetric authentication system. It also unbundles the authentication from the authorization thing. They don't call it authorization, but we'll see what it is. But Radius and TACACS, these are AAA servers. They were designed to be authentication, authorization, and accounting. Radius stands for Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service. The dial-in part got a tag. We're not just dialing in. So they created Diameter, which is supposed to be version 2. But again, these grew up in separate. Radius development continued after Diameter came out. So they're now 2 different things. We'll talk a little bit about that. Anybody here ever see Diameter? How many people I know running over in Europe? And I say we've got to come up with, again, Radius can control not just authentication, it can also, as we saw in WPA2 in our enterprise mode, Radius can set up the encryption at layer 2. Kerberos and Diameter can set it up at layer 4. And I want circumference. I'm going to put it in there, man. It's Larry's. It's my own. Circumference should be able to do IPsec. And this is my own. Larry's. But I want version 3. I want circumference to manage my IPsec sessions. So now, and I'd like it to be able to do all 3. I'd like to be able to pick up, do the Radius stuff. I'd like it to be able to set up layer 4 if it needed. But we need a management console. You're going to post material for this. It is in this material is already up at the at my Dropbox. I did not put it in the materials section yet. I'm sorry. I'll throw it there at lunch. Yeah. Can you get it from the Dropbox? Are you able to get to the Dropbox? Oh. Well, then let me throw it up there. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, that should be up there shortly. Are you doing something over there? There you go. Thanks, Rainey. I forgot to do that this morning. All right, single sign-on. The promise is reduced administrative costs. Interoperability issues because they don't all work well together. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets down. GSS API. The generic security service, application program interface. Not all versions of GSAPI are created equally. So it's relying on all Kerberos applications have to speak GSAPI. The problem is Microsoft's GSAPI doesn't work with, say, Solaris, which doesn't necessarily work with Red Hat the last time I checked. So that's an issue. We have interoperability issues. We have security issues. Somebody's in, they're all the way in. And one way to do like a single sign-on we used to do in the 90s, in the old Novell days, was through a login script that would be like, if you log into FSO1, If username equals Larry G, then attached to episode 2 is L. Greenblatt. Password this, stored in the system login script, clear text file in the public directory. Not a great idea. So scripts are very, very powerful. We do it so many times to tie a web server to SQL servers and stuff, but we never want to put credentials in scripts. Kerberos, Sesame, and now SAML. I'm going to put that in there. I just finished my SAML slide today. There we go. Let's put that in there. I need a graphic in there. Anybody want to vote for which Star Trek character I should get? Would that be more of a Scotty to get him into the... I don't know. We'll come up with something. All right, so this is Kerberos, and I love this analogy a student gave me. She said, I thought of Kerberos as an amusement park. You have to first get into the park. That's one level. But then you're authorized. That's to authenticate you get in the park. But you get authorized to get on rides. And when you go to the park, they give you an all-day pass. Ah, I like it. So instead of calling it a park, Kerberos has a realm. It's developed at MIT. It uses all symmetric encryption, by the way. The key to the realm is the Key Distribution Center, the KDC. In Microsoft, all domain controllers are KDCs. The KDC has two services, the authorization and the authentication. The authentication service called the authentication server. They wouldn't call that half-assed authorization service that, so they call it the ticket granting service. So you go into the domain, you log in, username and password, and if all is good, the authentication service gives you an all-day pass. It's called the TGT, the ticket granting ticket. You get named by somebody at the Department of Redundancy Department. It's your all-day pass. It's encrypted with your password, so only you should be able to see it when it comes back to you. Then you request access to an object. Can I get on this Ferris wheel? Well, if you're taller than Snoopy. No, can I print to this printer? Well, if you're authorized to use that printer, you encrypt the request with your TGT. It's symmetric. They have a copy. They can decrypt it and go, oh, okay, that came from Larry. It's an authentic request. And if you're authorized to do that, they'll issue you a ticket. Now, the ticket has two instances of a session key, a symmetric key, to get to the object. One of them is encrypted with your TGT, so only you can see that. And the other one's encrypted with that printer has their own object ticket. They can decrypt it. And now you're allowed to use it. And by default, well, I'll just say, communication can be encrypted. And I say can because in Windows 2000 it was off by default, but you could turn it on. With 2003 and above, it is on by default. You can turn it off. Kerberos also creates a hash type of thing. It's called a message integrity check. We're not going to get too caught up in it. I just want you to know, very testable to understand, Kerberos provides authentication. It provides confidentiality. It provides integrity. Everybody participating in the Kerberos realm, all the subjects, all objects, have to be principals. They're called principals. So once you're authenticated in the domain, you're now a principal. All right, so we said this. Authorization, though, the authorization is a yes or no. Again, that's the problem with Kerberos. Kerberos, like if I say, am I authorized to look at this file? And they go, yes. It didn't say, well, you can read, you can't write. But we have NTFS partitions that work with it to ensure that. Well, you know, it's not that people can read it, but I'm just saying it's not native in Kerberos. So it's a very limited form of authorization. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But keep in mind, it does encrypt the channel, and that's beautiful because I think of like, hey, can I see that file? Let me see. Yes, you can. But because you were allowed to and it was encrypted, so did everybody with a sniffer. You know, I wanted me to be authorized and no one else. So again, a user requests access to the realm, the authentication service authenticates you, it gives you the TGT. The user requests access to an object, and they give you two instances of a session ticket. You keep one, you send the other to the service. Sesame, very similar, but you're not going to get beat up. People who get beat up on access control have gotten half a dozen Kerberos questions. I only have one or two on Sesame. So know that it uses asymmetric for authentication. Still symmetric for the other stuff, and we know it's much faster. They unbundle the two services. They don't call it a TGS, they call it a privileged attribute server. And you do get more granularity of control. Here I can say you could read, but you can't write. And SAML, the new slide here, and Kirk and Spock are verifying this stuff on the assertions. I don't know, for some reason I saw assertions. I figured a tricorder could help assert things. Why do they have to have a tricorder and a communicator at this point? I mean, now that we know about phones and apps, I just think Spock would have created an app for his phone. But it's XML-based. It enables web-based single sign-on. It can authenticate and authorize. And there's three basic identities. Now, the principal is the subject, trying to use the thing. The identity provider, this is where I'm finding that people have outsourced identity providers using public certificates, and they can make this, that assertion, a third-party assertion that you are who you are. That sounds like a cool service. My customer's not doing that. They're their own identity provider. They use their domain controllers to get that information. The service provider is the app they're trying to get to. So they told me that. I didn't realize how big it was. But almost all the third-party apps they get to are using SAML to do a single sign-on. Now, I told you they didn't know why they were being prompted. I think it's this. There are two ways to, now let me go back in this. So, the identity provider is called the IDP. And then the service provider, the application using the SP. So it's two assertions. If it's IDP initiated, then you authenticate to the IDP, and then you're successfully done. I think what's going on somehow is they're getting this SP initiated and they don't want it. This is when you first try to get the app, and then the app says, oh, you got to first authenticate. And so I think that's exactly what's going on here. So at lunchtime, I am sending this over. And I got this from oasisopen.org. So they got a bunch of good stuff on SAML. Anybody here we're playing with SAML at all? And realize it. You might be, oh, no, it turns out we are. I didn't know. All right. Where's Marco? So there's so many times I want to call him back. There was a time we used to joke around, man, when I felt like I knew 70% of what went on Scott Paper's network. I'm lucky if I know 1% of any network now. And it's getting smaller. Just how complex things are. All right, so a AAA server can authenticate, authorize an account to distributed databases. User, subject, dials in. We used to think of, like say I used to have Earthlink. So I would dial into Earthlink and connect to a point of presence there. And that's actually a Radius client. That's a network access server, and that's there, not network attached storage. Another one of those SBVR, right? Semantics of business vocabulary. And the Radius server. So no matter where I dialed in, the Radius servers would keep track of my AAA information. They still know it was Larry, what I did, what I was authorized to do. Radius, again, was built for dial-in, but we do all kinds of stuff. Now, it was built to work with a layer 2 protocol, PPP. We did try to get PPP on top of Ethernet so we could do our PAP, CHAP, or EAP. But we know now it's a lot more efficient to use EAP over LANs. Right? That's 802.1x. So I don't have to be dialed in to be using Radius because of EAP. Right? So no matter where I dialed in, I got the same AAA information. But I'm not just dialed today. I'm driving down the street. And Radius kind of maintains a connection like this. I dial up and say I connect via my phone, and the closest point of presence is New York. I'm actually driving down the street, and I put my foot down and I go, there, I got it. I'm grounded to it. I'm connected. But now I'm moving, and eventually I'm going to lose connection with that. But I see a client in Philly, so I jump up and I land on the client in Philly, and for that moment I'm disconnected. If this had been diameter, I would have had multi-path connections. First, I would have had 2 connections to my Radius client in New York. Then I see Philly, and I grab one of my connections, goes to Philly. Then I lose New York. Then I let go, and I go back. I never let go. I always had 1 foot on the ground. I got 2 feet. I always have 1 on the ground. So it is common knowledge that diameter provides better support for mobile IP, or roaming. TACACS was originally an open standard. One of the choices they made that used to show up on tests, I don't know, is that TACACS uses TCP, Radius uses UDP. TACACS encrypts username and password. Radius and CHAP only encrypts your password. They have a separate, even though it's a AAA server, in Radius, whatever server I designate to be my authentication server is also my authorization server. I can't unbundle that. I can have a separate accounting server, but in TACACS, I can have 3 separate servers, maybe more scalable. TACACS itself wasn't very popular. Cisco took it over and is upgraded a couple times, and it's now very, very nice. TACACS Plus is the latest version. Been out for many, many years, at least a dozen years. Supports multi-factor authentication. Well, it sounds like it's doing more than CHAP. Yeah, because they do LEAP or PEEP. They're versions of EAP. And anything that supports EAP can do multi-factor authentication now. Diameter, twice the radius. Major consideration, though. You want to think of that roaming, mobile IP. But only my European guys have done diameter in my experience. All right, administrative tasks. I have to create user accounts. I have to assign the appropriate privileges and then maintain it through all those moves and deletes. Securely retire them. We have a lot of problems with people still getting residual access after they were let go. It's a disconnect between IT and HR. Well, for our standard employees, this is tough enough. But for our contractors and temps, they came in for a fixed assignment. So you came in for 6 months. Have it automatically retire after 6 months. If they get extended, someone in HR can fix that. That's very testable. Centralized administration. I have a single entity does this. This is what Marco and I did. We took 27 decentralized lands, separately managed, made a centralized environment to have standard directory structures, standard object names and resource naming, standard usernames and conventions, standard password policies. And then there was a separate help desk that you just called to get anything, no matter what department you're in. Before, you just went to your departmental administrator. And before, it used to be a lot faster because your administrator sat next to you. Hey, can you give me access to the shared directory? Sure. Okay, there you go. Can it work? Yeah. All right, try logging on back in. Oh, okay, that worked. All right, great. Now you got to put an access control request to Corp. And hopefully, you don't even know what the guy looks like. Hopefully, he'll get on it, the next day. So you have administrative delay. Some things are better served to be locally managed. You don't have to central. So we're going to talk about hybrid administration. Seems to make the most sense. Getting your CAC, getting an email address, these things, they got to be centrally managed. Who can print to that printer in customer service? Let somebody in customer service worry about that. So decentralized, it could be a mess. I mean, we had all kinds of problems, mostly standardization issues, what we thought. But there's a very testable concept here. If Bob started out in the help desk, say, and they gave him some rights, and they administer their own server, and then he makes friends with desktop support, he goes over there, and they give him rights. And help desk didn't necessarily clean his up. And this goes on. It's a series of 5 moves. He's super user. It's known as authorization creep. Authorization levels will creep up through a series of moves, and it's mostly associated with decentralized management. So hybrid makes the most sense for most organizations. Now, in a DAC system, we said you would give rights to an individual identity-based control. You might see that phrase, right? Which is true about identity-based controls. And it would say it involves assigning capabilities to explicit users. And it makes it movement a pain. It's much easier to do role-based. Right? It's a separation of duties, so to speak. So the user, Bob is a person, but his role is he's a salesperson. The operation, he needs to read these, write that, and print this. I give the operational capabilities to the role, and then I add Bob to that role. And it's not only easier for us, it's a lot easier on a computer. And I can put roles inside of roles. So if I had, say, a shared resource, a printer that both customer service and whatever HR sit next to each other. Maybe hey, and the printer's out in the hallway there. yeah, we can create a group called HP LaserJet Forms Printer and just add HR and whatever sales or customer service into that role. So you could definitely put roles inside of roles. All right, you're going to reuse data. You're going to reuse hard drives. You delete something, it's not deleted. When you delete something from a hard drive, it's like breaking the write per tag tape off of a tape thing and saying, yeah, you're now allowed to overwrite it. You're just telling the file allocation table this sector and I should say the block at this sector and this track intersection is available for overwrite. Now, I told you these are fixed sizes. In NTFS, the default size is 512 bytes for each one of these little blocks, the intersection of a track and a sector. Well, if I only wrote 2 bytes there, I've got left over 510. But suppose I had it filled up for the 512, and I only wrote 2 bytes over it. I have 510 of residual slack space, residual data left there. It's like taking a 2-hour adult movie. You're done with it. You're going to record over it. You put a half hour of Dora the Explorer on the front. You still got a lot of stuff over there. So, I should probably update this. I don't like these terms anymore. We're going to do this. Degauss. Is that how you spell Degauss? Degauss. Okay. No. One S. Okay, it doesn't like it even though it spell checks it. How did I once spell it? Oh, great. Doesn't want to do that. Larry and his creativity. It's open office drive me bonkers. Look at that. It's going to crash. Dang you. All right, while that's doing that, the ways to get rid of the data is to either software overwrite or electromagnetically destroy it. Oh, the hybrid model? The hybrid model would have taken important enterprise-wide resources, getting your CAC, getting an email address, getting whatever, your username. These things need to be centrally managed. But there are departmental resources like the local printer and customer service. The only people who are going to ask to print that are people who sit there. It was like, can I print to that? I don't want to have to go to corp and be centrally managed. So we will have decentralized management for departmental resources. Right, you can delegate somebody. Okay, cool. All right, this thing's still crashing bad. But again, 2 ways to get rid of this object. As soon as it crashes, I'll reboot it. But while it's waiting here, one is to overwrite, and the other is to electromagnetically wipe it, and that's Degauss. But when I overwrite, if I overwrite it once, it's called a clear. If I overwrite it multiple times, it's called a purge. And how much is a purge? Well, how many times do I have to overwrite? It depends. To meet Department of Defense 5222M, sometimes 3 overwrites will work. But there are other classes of data that have to be compartmentalized data that have to be 7 overwrites. And why? Man, this thing is really falling hard. I might have to reboot my system here. Well, because in the old days, track density wasn't very tight. So what would happen is, it's kind of like, do you ever go to a parking lot and you got paint in the lines to let you know where to park your car? But it hasn't been painted in years, and 80% of the paint is gone. But you could still, even maybe 90% of the paint, but you could still figure out where to park your car. You can still kind of see leftover lines there. Well, that's what happens here. You can still have some electromagnetic. Now, the guys, my friends are guys that work real top cases. I get to work for some really cool stuff, my students anyway. They tell me, dude, keep in mind, I'm not getting all the data back. I'm lucky to get 5% of it, but I've gotten convictions with 5% of data because it could be very obvious. So, yeah. So now, but today, this isn't true. After drives manufactured 2002, the drive density is so tight, I understand one overwrite will purge it. But we're not going to worry about that. Guys, this thing's really ugly. So why don't we take, I was going to take an earlier lunch too. Guys, why don't we take an early lunch? It's 11, and we got plenty of time today. So it's 11. Let's take an hour and a half, and let me straighten this out. I'm going to do some hard reboots. Everybody okay with that? It's 11. We'll get back at 12:30. All right, great. Sorry about this technical issue. I think it's a race condition, personally. And I decided I won't be able to edit when I see things I want to change, but for the sake of stability, I'm reading the PDFs, and I changed readers. I'm reading from my Sumatra PDF reader, pretty stable. So, all right. So emanations, we said in physical security that every time I send electromagnetic or electrical signal through a medium, that electrical signal is going to create a magnetic wave. That they just go together. Electromagnetism, they go together. So somebody could, we said on the one hand, we're a crosstalk yesterday. Crosstalk was an emanations problem that was an integrity issue. This is a confidentiality issue. People can reproduce it. They've known it for years. So tempest is a broad, a very rigid standard, I should say. And when I was at Wang Laboratories, we had one site, a Goddard rocket for GE Goddard building, GE's Goddard rockets. So they were out in King of Prussia, PA, and everything had to be tempest. Not really required much. That was a long time ago too. Even in the United States, I understand that tempest standards are very rigid, and they've lifted most of them in most facilities, U.S. facilities. And tempest is mostly used in U.S. military facilities overseas. We still have an emanation security. There's still MSEC, but that's not anywhere near as rigid as tempest. The two basic ways to prevent somebody from eavesdropping on my conversation. I could soundproof the room. I could turn the stereo up really loud so it's hard for them to understand. So we soundproof or electromagnetically proof the room with a control zone. We set up this control zone, and that's done with an electromagnetic barrier, and that's known as a Faraday cage. This is a Faraday cage that would fit over a server. For those of you who have been in facilities that were cleared to TS, that entire facility is in a Faraday cage. White noise generators are other ways that one could, assuming that they were legal. Let's see something funny. It's pretty cool. I know a number of people had it, and I wish I bought one. They sold them on Amazon. They took them off. I could probably get it again. Illegally, but you can still buy them. Just grab them. This type of thing. This is what my buddy had. It's great hacker. Mike Vien. Mike Vien is a great app layer guy. He can disassemble stuff and do a lot of reverse engineering. So, but anyway, he says he carries one of these with him just when he goes to the movies. He doesn't want to hear your phone call. So if he hears anyone make a phone call, sure enough, nobody could make a phone call in the class. He had it with him. We could not make a phone call. Pretty cool. But when I say you could use a white noise generator, you better check with the FCC if you're in the United States. So it's just in theory. A honeypot, I don't like. We already covered this. Now, the idea, remember the difference between enticement and entrapment. Enticement, well, it's a question of intent. Enticement is when somebody intended to commit a crime and you set up a lure and you had cameras there, whatever. Entrapment is when they were tricked. They never intended to commit a crime. You tricked them into doing it somehow. A honey net is just what's done. Instead of one machine. And to give you an example, back in 2009, I had some senior guys from, I believe it was Sprint, and he said that they had. He said, if you looked at the IP, this is pretty cool. He said, if you look at the IP4 address space, it should look like a very badly fragmented hard drive. Because there's a lot of people got A's and B's. They're not using all that stuff, you know. And even their ranges, I'll just give you the entire whatever, 3,000. So it should be a whole bunch of stuff. But every time they look, there's something being done in these unassigned IPs. So they set up a honey net of over 300,000 virtual machines using these IPs just to see what people are doing out there. Pretty awesome, 300,000. Now, a pseudo flaw, I only know in one real case, but it shows up on so many practice exams, so I figured I'd cover it. It's like a honey net, but in an application or an operating system, and the only case I know is an application. We talked about SMTP, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. We know that runs over port 25 when it's in clear text. We can run that over SSL. I don't know if they cover that in the test. That's what I understand people do. They don't run that in over 25, in the wild like that. That's certainly not ISPs. All right, so there's a whole lot of commands, and I mentioned VRFY, EXPN. These aren't mail servers. This is a guy at a telnet prompt. So they, one of the worst things you could do is debug. SMTP is a debug command. Enabling that on the outside interface would be a flawed configuration, and they didn't, but they made it look like that. They set up a little mail client, so when he typed debug at a prompt, he got what looked like a debug command prompt, but it was really just a mail client, and it was a pseudo flaw, so it was a trap. A padded cell. All right, well, here's one way use of the honeypot is someone breaks in, you use it as evidence, you go to court, and they go, nah, it's entrapment. I don't know. I mean, it's hard. Off the record, what I've heard from my guys who have to deal with this, putting a honeypot the way most of our tests want them to in a DMZ, you cannot use that as evidence. They said, no, you were asking people to come to that. That's entrapment. But if it's behind your internal firewall, no one from the outside should have been there. And now they're accepting that. But that's off the record. My evidence, Your Honor? Well, some guy said so. That's not good evidence, so I don't want to, don't say that's fact. That's what I've heard. All right, now, Pat, if someone, I'm going to do that, I can't use that evidence. But me, I don't really want to get him in trouble. Maybe I don't even want to kick him off the network. In fact, if you kick a guy off the network, you may have started a fight with a guy who's better than you. I mean, in actuality, I'm a network ops guy. I'm not, my history is there. My history isn't in hacking and breaking into people's stuff. I don't want to get my butt whooped. So maybe you keep them in the honeypot, and it's called a padded cell, or you could switch them through 802.1x. You could actually have people there until they authenticate and get to the real world, right? Remember, 802.1x is EAP over LANs. I can prompt you for all kinds of credentials. Your smart card required before you get into the proper VLAN. It's great stuff. So the padded cell is just a place to keep them. They're happy. Actually, what I like, remember TCP window size? How about if somebody breaks in, rather than kick them off, shrink their TCP window size to 1? And they'll just think maybe that you have a sucky network. It's the performance blow, and they're just going to go somewhere else. That's one theory. All right. Other threats to access control. Impersonation, and it can be done many ways. I can impersonate a voice. I can impersonate an IP address. I can impersonate a certificate, right? Through any type of fake credential. Impersonation is also known as spoofing and masquerading. I say that again, especially for those of you who English isn't your native language, because this is common knowledge. Impersonation, spoofing, and masquerading all mean the same thing. You're pretending to be a different identity, typically with faked credentials or stolen credentials. Now, it could be that he's not pretending to be Bob. You don't have a Bob who works here. Who is this guy? When a hacker breaks into your network, they want to maintain access. And they'll create a fictitious subscriber, a phony ID. And if I broke in, I want to maintain, I wouldn't call mine Bob. I'd look at your service account nomenclature and I'd go, oh, SVC-exchange store test or something like that. Maybe sneak past you. Rogue infrastructure, I keep beating it up. It's just going to get worse. IPv6 is just going to get worse. The only fix I know is IPsec. I told you there was a guy who wanted to hire me, and he wanted to replace it. So there are other people, there are other technologies that are trying to secure IPv6. I don't support it. I want to see IPv6 fixed, or IPsec fixed properly. And it could be just as simple as a good management console and making sure everybody uses the same terms across the thing so we can get different vendor support. Invalid input, that's the big ones, right? The buffer overflows, the SQL injection, your cross-site scripts. Piggyback, replay attacks. I just refire the credentials and you might agree. I print the check again. Piggybacking or tailgating. Social engineering beats just about anything. And side channel attacks, we said, is any time you're not meeting the math head on. So any type of timing attack. All right. We're out of that domain. Domain. All right, now yesterday we finished up architecture with one exception. We needed to get the 3 slides on vulnerability assessment. So I meant to change my default program to open with. Choose default. Yeah, there we go. So let's get to and here's security testing. And again, the only reason I had these slides here is because they have port scanning in the network section, but they have testing in another section. So get through this. All right, vulnerability assessment is just very friendly, sometimes called a blue team exercise. You come in and you make an assessment physically, technically, operationally. You are hired to come in there. Hopefully it's a third party. You need a third party to look at your stuff, give you an outside view. And I've done some of this, and people introduce me to the other managers. Larry's going to be doing this today. Please work with him. Give him an account. Hey, he's going to be asking you questions. He needs some Visio diagrams and stuff, and whatever you've got. And so you give me this, and then I very quickly I can make some assessment. Most of the time we think of you run a tool. You run Nessus, by far the best known tool. These are going to identify mostly missing patches and configuration issues. So either you didn't apply the latest patch, which they know, or you fully patched, but you left the password blank or something like that, configuration. And again, your goal is just like sparring. I always think people get this wrong. Your goal is not to show off how good you are. Your goal is to help your partner get better and yourself. You always get better. Penetration testing validates the vulnerabilities because you were very up for you gave me the Visio diagram. I ran Nessus, which set off all kind of IDSs, and you identified where I was coming from. You could have really stopped me. A real attack might not have been able to do that. Or I may say, it looks like it's vulnerable, and you go, no, I don't think it is. I think your tool is wrong. We all said their tools get false positives. So to penetrate the test, to penetrate the system is the vulnerability validation. See, I told you. It can be very dangerous. It's like a vulnerability assessment and as martial arts, and I go, okay, let me see how you stand. And that's normally what I do. That's the first thing I do. I want to see how somebody stands. You get in a fighting position. And I can tell right away by your feet if you have any clue. If your feet are off in wacky positions, and I'm like, all right, this guy is going to need a lot of work. But I may tell you, you might think you're good. You might think you got something away. And I go, dude, the way you're holding that rear hand, you're going to get smacked. You got to keep your rear hand high. And you go, no, I don't believe you. And Roy Jones Jr. didn't keep his hands high. Real high. He jumps around, with his hands all low. And for a while, no one could penetrate him. So, again, the penetration test validates. Of course, he did. Everybody see that when Antonio Tarver caught him? That career-changing punch crushed him. Just crushed him. So, penetration test is like sparring, and this is dangerous. You can get hurt. I don't like to do pen tests, and sometimes I think they're a colossal waste of time. I really worry that people overdo it. But there's definitely times it's like sparring. I don't think sparring is appropriate for most martial artists. Again, most of your risks in physical security of your body is going to be, the reason you show up in an emergency room is, I said, is probably from a fall. The reasons you go to the doctor is most likely a sore back, bad knees, or poor stress management. Sparring isn't going to help you. Most of my Tai Chi students, when I was teaching regular, were over 70. Having people over 70 spar doesn't reduce risk. But if you're a policeman, if you're in the special forces, I had guys who think I'm going to jail, and for 6 months or whatever. So then that's different. Then you need to know what it's like to spar. I want my banks pen tested. I want the military pen tested, but I don't know that everybody needs it. All right, some guidelines from NIST. They have their 800-115, which superseded 800-42. I still like one of the things at 42, so I still keep that slide, but this was long superseded that. And it's just a guideline. All the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, all their special publications, all the SPs, they're all guidelines. FIPS is the actual standards, right? Federal Information Processing Standards. So we're just going to go over what is testing, review the basic techniques from port scanning to whatever, to banner grabbing or whatever, breaking it, physically breaking it. How do I know, how do I find my targets? How do I find the live IPs? How do I figure out what's on there? How do I validate the vulnerability? And that's typically through the exploitation, the pen test. And then you give them an assessment. You know, again, just because somebody says you're vulnerable doesn't mean you have any risk. You need to do an impact assessment. Without an impact assessment, you have nothing. Right? And the post-activity, that's the whole point. When you get a test, you got to do something about it. All right, so the basic phases is somebody first figures out what you have. They footprint. Footprinting is sometimes described as mapping out the live IPs. Once I know what that this is a live IP, what does that IP do? And that's fingerprinting. And a lot of that's going to be done with port scanning, and Nmap by far the best known port scanner. Vulnerability assessment, I could run tools, and it's going to be very noisy. Or a real red team pen tester, they're using Telnet. They're going in and trying to see, you know, let me see how this responds to my input. What version is this, the unpatched such and such? Now, when somebody breaks in, they generally come in through some low-level user. Maybe they got in a window in the basement. They want to get upstairs. They want to get the keys to the kingdom. They want to get root or admin. Privilege escalation is the process of getting the root or getting the keys. And once you got that, you want to maintain it. And they plant back doors or so, and they're known as rootkits. And be careful. You cannot get root privilege with a rootkit. You have to get root privilege somehow. And rootkits are to maintain that. And then they cover their tracks. They erase events and logs and stuff. Now, basic reconnaissance. I just want to know who registered that domain name. And not all sites allow me to do this here. Spade here now. Where did I put spade? I think I stuck it here somewhere. Apps. Well, since I don't have it handy, we'll worry about that later. But this is an old tool. This is from 99. Yeah, you could get, actually, forget this. Let's just show how other easy, how you just do this. So it's querying the who is registrar. So I go, who is internetwork defense. And just in case, I'll put dub. And I get the same basic information. Lovely. It's all public unless you pay to have it suppressed, which you can. Now, with Sam Spade, I was able to identify my name servers. So then I click on the name server, and the name server can come up, and then I can attempt a zone transfer. And then one of my favorite little tools, and it just looks good here. It's actually better if you use something like htget. But crawl the website. I can download the entire website to a local directory, search it for hidden forms, search it for email addresses. Looks like normal usage for the most part, especially in a big website. You're not going to notice somebody doing this to you. And as far as querying your name, I don't even ask you. I ask a registrar. Just finding out who registered, their names, and sometimes people put real names in here, like get your name servers and stuff here, is a very passive thing. When we talk about reconnaissance, we want to start reconnaissance as passive as possible. In fact, a couple of people in here seem to know Ralph H. Mendia, and Ralph has done quite a bit of this, and Ralph's a good buddy of mine. He said for him, it's about 70% of his work. 70% of his work, he said, is just doing passive reconnaissance before he does anything. So, good stuff. So this is who is reconnaissance. Again, you can do this from Google now, but there's a couple other neat tools that come with Sam Spade. Hey, what's going on here now? Don't tell me there we go. No. Oh, is that the last of it? Did I just end on that? I didn't do actual scanning? just basically, okay, let's pause this one for a second. Let me bring up the next module. That's why it's not going any further. All right, so security assessment and testing. Now we've understood our requirements. We built the solutions. We're going to see how well we're doing. How well is it working? So again, we're kind of still architecting here, though. This is kind of I'm a little rough on how they separated those domains, especially when I'm going to get app security later on. Why didn't I have application security earlier before I started testing it? But yeah, well, I'm trying to put it in the context of the SDLC. So we're going to be designing some really logging solutions because, again, if I'm going to test, if I want assurance, I need auditing, monitoring, testing, right? Exercising. These give us assurance. So we're testing to see if things are working. Tests, these that are very technical. So right now, it's not like a business continuity plan. We are really just looking at how does this technically work? Not are people that good for the most part. So we want to design and validate our systems, and we have to come up with some strategies to do this. A lot is going to come from our logs. We've got to look at our logs. A lot of it, we haven't even had app security, but they talk about code reviews. Yeah, let's back up here. So in system design, a high-level, say, data architect creates a blueprint, and then you get developers to write according to design. And they write in source code. Computers speak ones and zeros. I'm not going to program a computer in binary. That's very tedious. I need to get through life using fewer keystrokes. Well, I could get 4 bits done with 1 hex character. All right, that's assembler language. That's hexadecimal. In assembler, you don't have to type binary, but it's almost as bad. You still have to understand the actual Boolean functions. Well, then you get what's in register here, and you XOR it with this data item, and you get your result. And it's like, no, I'd rather say, get the thing out of my memory and print it on the printer. So we have high-level languages. And these languages have to be compiled or interpreted. You know, remember old BASIC programs, and we still have during development, people will sometimes do interpreted things. You read in a line of code, you convert it to machine language. You read in a line of code, you convert. And if it works, nice, and it's slow though, but at least, if it failed, it'll tell you where it failed. Error in line 144. A compiled code is when you take all of that source code and convert it to machine language. And it's going to run much faster. If it's a problem, it's hard to troubleshoot, though. You can't decompile. So I just mentioned a good buddy of mine, Mike Vien. Mike Vien he can disassemble. He says, I don't decompile, I disassemble. I can take it back, and so I'm not looking at binary, I'm looking at hex. But you still got to know what's going on in these hex codes and have registers shift things around, and you got to really know your Boolean logic. If you could decompile, you would actually have the source code. Well, you can't. So how do you test it? I want a third party testing the source code. In fact, a lot of you guys, Spayware guys, a lot of the work I've done was out in Spayware, out in San Diego, wasn't for you guys. I've been on site on the base probably, I don't know, 8-10 times. But I've also been out at Booz Allen at a number of their sites. In fact, including just December, I was out at Booz Allen out in San Diego, and they do a lot of your code reviews. They do a lot of code reviews for a lot of people, actually. And that's great. You want a third party to look at the source code before it gets compiled. That source code is your intellectual property. You got to be careful sharing the source code. Now, some people are open source. That's what open source programming means. A lot of people think open source means free. No, it doesn't mean free. It just means you can see the ingredients that I put into my soup. Where closed source is just eat the soup. If you don't, you like it, good. If you don't like it, I can't tell you exactly what's in there. You got to figure it out. And you pull out a molecular thing. It's like I can see the molecules. I don't know where he got these tomatoes or anything. All right, so that's our goal. We want to also test our controls. And that's, for me, is the best reason for running a pen test. How would you know if your IDS works if you yourself don't fire attacks at it? So I do agree with at least running some of these attacks, at least trying to attack it. I don't know if it's a full red team. A red team or a pen test is usually sometimes called a black box test. We'll see it. And that assumes that the testers have very limited understanding. So they have to figure out what's in there. With me, you gave me a Visio diagram. They've got to figure it out without setting off IDSs. So that's a red team test. Only senior management knows who's there. All right. And again, it's best to get a third party to trust someone, especially when you have a service level agreement with another company. You know, I don't want them saying, no, I tested it, looks good. I'd really like somebody else could go in your place, the third party that we both trust. Our security logs, and you've got to work very closely with your compliance management groups. And this could be, if you're a service provider, what did you promise your customers you could do? But it's also legal requirements. I noticed there are two areas of our security plan where I don't stress, oh, you just do it based on business requirements and then check the laws. It seems like with logging and with business continuity management, laws seem to drive it. Yeah, and I noticed that that's true in a test. I was trying to reformat that, and I can't. It's a PDF file. I wanted to bring up that thing there. So we're going to work with compliance management to determine, and again, Sarbanes-Oxley would be a classic example of telling you not just what events you must log for, your logging frequency, how many samples per day or per whatever, per interval, and your minimum and maximum retention times. Now, if the law says you must hold it for at least 3, but you can't hold it for more than 7, you consider then a business objective. Do we have a business objective to hold it for 7? Well, if you have a business objective, then I probably do that. No, I can't think of one. Then hold it for 3. Because every second you hold or store anything is a risk, because now you have to protect the store. I don't care what you're storing. If you're storing grain, we had to protect it from thieves, we had to protect it from mildew, we had to protect it from rats. Right? So you don't want to store things if you don't have to. A lot of people are pack rats and they try to store all this stuff, and it gets really bad because you didn't know you had this stuff, and somebody breaks in and gets all kinds of sensitive data, or you get subpoenaed for it. I think I told you when Marco and I had to build a mail server, the funny part was they were, again, this happened when Scott Paper was acquired by Kimberly-Clark, and there were rumors of insider trading, and they said, oh, do you retain mail on tape for at least 3 years as you're required by law? And they said, some brilliant manager said, are you kidding? Us? We do it for 7. Bad answer. Once he said that, they were subpoenaed for 7 years. That's why we had to rebuild an MS Mail server that could restore from 1/4-inch cartridge. And 8mm, it was a nightmare to try and do this. And we really, they did not have 7 years of mail. They had all kinds of gaps missing. It was awful. It was really bad. And it was all illegal tactic. I don't think anybody was looking at this stuff. I think they just wanted to get them to cry uncle. But it is an important concept in logging. Logs have vulnerabilities. First of all, I have a hard time interpreting it, so I'm going to use log analysis tools. And I forget who it was. A couple of people have been typing in that they do this stuff. You do some SIM stuff. Was it ArcSight or Splunk? What were you guys doing? I know you did some SIM stuff. Yeah, I can use SIM tools like ArcSight, Splunk, NetIQ. There's a number of tools out there. Felipe has used most of them. So these can gather all the different log events from various devices and help pull out noise and go, look, if this is happening on the perimeter router, and this is happening on the firewall, and I saw this on the servers, and this on the router, I'm willing to bet this is happening. Monitoring the log is when you look at it day to day, and we think of this as an operations staff, an administrative control. Auditing the log is a periodic event, and we think of management calling in a third party, and that's a technical control. And logs are read-write text files. If you're ever going to use this in a court as evidence, it's going to come under, a lot of scrutiny. Are you sure that wasn't tampered with? So logging to write one's media or to digitally sign them with timestamps could help prove the validity of these logs. And all testable, by the way. Quite a bit on law. The logs track changes associated with the operating system, with a given application, with a given user. Right? That's what we think of security. I'm trying to secure the user, the operating system, the application, and then all the network infrastructure. Keyboard logs are kind of cute. First one I ever saw was a hardware dongle. You plug the keyboard cable into it, plug it into the computer, come back a week later, you get all the stuff that they logged, that they typed. Now they've got them where they're in software, so you don't have to do that, but the software ones can be picked up by antivirus software, maybe. But then they have keyboard loggers now that are USB, that fit inside the USB to where it doesn't stick out, so you don't even see it there. And it has Wi-Fi in it, so you could just, now the attacker just sits in the parking lot. Before they had to attach it once. Keyboard logs could be used by management, of course. I mean, it's not always bad. You might want to see what your people are typing. And in the United States, can I record your call? If you call me and I don't tell you, if you called me, can I record it without telling you? Depends on the state. The federal guideline is to notify, and I'd remember this phrase, authorized and unauthorized users. Well, how do I do that? Well, on a phone call, you call a bank, you hear, this call may be recorded for training and other quality purposes. Well, you do the same thing on a computer with a banner, but you always say warning, never welcome. Somebody supposedly broke into NASA and he got away with that. His lawyer said, but Your Honor, the banner said, welcome to the NASA network. I got a welcome mat on my door. I don't think anybody would think it reasonable to kick it in. It said welcome. Oh, well, you know how lawyers are. Keyboards, firewalls, routers log, and IDSs are nothing but logging servers. That's what they do. They log events. You know, your IPS can prevent some stuff, but the rules are going to be way smaller than you have in your IDS. Because there's a lot of stuff that you don't want to stop, but you just want to keep. It's interesting. I'm going to keep a record of it in case it turns out to be an interesting event. All right, so we said you account for OS level stuff, application level stuff, user level stuff. Technically, I have to define what I'm going to measure and how I'm going to measure it. You need tools. You got to come up with some good tools to do this stuff. But administratively, you take the measurements. Now, this has changed over the years, so I want you to make sure you know. Auditing to NIST was a management control, but we know to the ISO it's technical. Monitoring was an operational control. To the ISO, it's administrative. Yeah, those could be important in your near future. And just a note from NIST, the difference between them. In general, the more real-time an activity is, the more it falls into monitoring. So we mostly think of auditing as a periodic event. All right, and then you got to go over things. And we got to use our SIM tools, our audit reduction tools. And how would I know it's an attack? How do I know that's not normal usage? Two basic ways: variance, anomaly, behavior, heuristically. I just noticed that this doesn't follow the pattern of our normal usage. It varied from what we normally do. It's unusual behavior. It doesn't follow the patterns, the heuristic patterns we do, right? It's anomalous behavior. But that could be a new attack. I mean, a new application. This is just something new. You hired a new employee and he types funny or whatever. You got a new application there. So an anomaly-based IDS has a problem being vulnerable to false positives. It's likely to identify something as an attack when it's not. It's just something it never saw before. The other way is to use a signature detector. I know, look, SYN and FIN set in the same TCP header. That's not just an anomaly. That's a scan. That's it. That's a SYN-FIN scan. It's well known. The problem is if there's a new attack, the signature detector doesn't have a signature and it's going to be vulnerable to a false negative. That was an attack and you didn't know it. Marty Roche wrote Snort. Snort's the best known signature detector IDS I know. And open source, freeware. And Snort, I took his class in 2002. Marty Roche taught a class at SANS. It's just a one-day thing. It's part of the IDS track. And he said, yeah, I know. Snort's a signature detector. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? If it's a new attack, do you know how big the Snort community is? If it's a new attack at 10 o'clock in the morning, I bet you by 10:15 I got a signature. And he said, what's an anomaly IDS going to tell you, even if it's right? It goes, huh? And I don't know. You know what? That has some truth to it, but signatures got really long. And there are some patterns that just aren't right. I don't have to look at packets. I can just tell you in my environment, clients talk to servers. They don't try to open up communication channels to other clients. So that's just strange behavior. So I think a well-protected environment is going to use a little bit of both here. All right, so we use our SIM tools, security information event management tools, to take all of these things and correlate things. These are data mining tools. We'll talk more about this in app security, how data mining works, but it just looks for unusual patterns and stuff and extract things. Not necessarily testable that I know of, but all the SIM providers now have an IAM tool as well. And there was a Gartner thing came out, it was 2009, asking for IAM SIM integration. At that point, they weren't separate; they were separate tools usually. And it was pretty funny. I went to a trading firm once a year. Me and a couple of guys go out and we gotta have beers and just talk about stuff. And I brought this up to one of the server guys, and Mark, are you still not here? Because you know this guy very well. He's a very beloved character. Anyway, so he said, dude, we just installed Quest IAM, and we found the problem right away. And I said, what was it? I can't say. Like, oh, really? Let me guess. You had an admin go into porn sites, but not logged in as himself, but it looked really weird when the Exchange service account was logged in from a workstation. He goes, dude, that's pretty good. So a year later, I go back and I'm hanging with some of the guys again, and I just want to make sure I was telling the story right. I said, Maurice, am I telling this properly? And when I said it, he goes, dude, you got a good memory. And my boss, my old boss, the trading firm was there, Jeremy, and he wasn't there the first time. He goes, dude, I didn't hear about this. Who was it? I still can't say. And that's what makes Maurice such a great guy. Because if he badmouths somebody else, you don't know what he's saying about me or anybody else. But that's the kind of class act he is. All right. So we need log reduction tools. Whether they talk about IAM or not, I would think about it. All right, our IDSs can be network-based or host-based. And network-based is going to be a sniffer. In fact, Marty Roche said, why did I call it snort? Because sniffer was taken. So it is. It's a sniffer, but it has rules to look for specific signatures. And I have been asking the folks at Wireshark to please let me process IDS rules or snort rules. They should be able to read that in. You can actually do something like it. You really can do any snort rule you could set up as a colorization rule, so the packet will show up in a different color. But I want to be able to just read them in and process them, exact syntax. A host-based IDS looks for anomalous behavior on that machine. Like, why is somebody trying to write to the System32 directory? If Bob is sitting on the accounting server, abusing the accounting server right there, no network-based IDS is going to pick that up, is it? So a well-protected environment will use both. I'm sorry, Mike, what was that question there? What were you referring to? What happened? Oh, did other people experience that? Can you guys all hear me? Did anyone else miss anything? Okay, maybe it was on your end then, Mike. Okay. All right, now we had signature-based or behavior-based. And I said, I want you to pass your test, but I don't want you to sound silly to your colleagues. And I said they could be called behavior-based, anomaly-based. They could be called statistical. It could be called heuristic. I have never heard it called this outside of ISC square. Did you know it could also be called a time-based induction machine? Oh yeah, you didn't know that? Oh, it's common knowledge. Yeah, Time-based induction machine. Why, that would be, real-time anomaly detection. Felipe, you've worked with IDSs? Yeah, ever hear it called a time-based induction machine? Yeah. I picture somehow Back to the Future. It's a time-based induction machine. Well, it might be called that on your test, so at least get ready for that. If you see a time-based, it's common knowledge. Now, sensors collecting the information. These, just think of it as closed-circuit television. Sensors are like cameras. They have to report back to a management console, to the monitoring stations. And people have come up with ways to bypass closed-circuit television. The three basic ways you see closed-circuit television bypass in a movie. One, they break the camera. They spray paint, whatever. You denial service the sensor. Well, that's going to be pretty obvious. People break a camera. They go, hey, I'm not getting anything on the third floor anymore. Let's run over and see what's going on. All right, so they'd rather not be so obvious. So the other two ways, I sneak in under the radar. The camera doesn't pick up anything below 2 feet. So if you just crawl on the floor, or the camera moves, and I run with it, instead of just behind it. So, well, that's evasion. You try to go where the IDS doesn't look. I sent a bunch of attacks with bad checksums. The IDS ignored it, that they were bad packets. Or you insert a picture of the room with nobody in it, right in front of the camera. I can insert misleading data. I can put in, dude, I send I started a TCP connection with a remote host, but then I sent a reset with a TTL of 1 less that would hit the host, but the IDS sensor got it, man. So he thought that connection was killed. So there's a couple. That's called an insertion attack. So evasion attack, again, this is when you can send something to the victim that the IDS would ignore. And I just gave you a classic example. So we know, we mentioned that routers are decrement TTLs. Routers, if they decrement a TTL, need to recompute a checksum. Routers want to be fast. Routers, not all have, over the years, actually checked incoming checksums. So it would take a bad one and fix it. So if the attacker was on the same segment as an IDS sensor and fired attacks with bad checksums, the IDS default rules would be to ignore that packet. But the router fixed it, so the victim got hit. It's lovely. Let's imagine there's nothing, there's cameras everywhere. You can't evade it. They're looking everywhere. So you insert something misleading. So again, say there's a router separating the victim and the IDS. Well, I could start sending things with a TTL of 1 less than the victim's going to see. So let's say one of the worst attacks I talked before was a reverse shell, right? Reverse shell. And let's say the signature of this reverse shell is you see somebody typing in CMD for, to get a command prompt. So the IDS is looking for CMD, and you send your C, you get your M, but then you send something misleading. You send an X with a TTL of 1 less than the victim's going to see, but the IDS gets it. Then you send your D. So the IDS saw CMXD, nothing wrong with that, but the victim saw CMD only. One of my favorite things I heard they insert is pretty cool. IDS classify attacks, right? So this is pretty cool. Suppose you create some new malware, right? And you want to make sure, is this going to get picked up by any of the virus scanners? Am I looking too much like other malware? So you can upload it to this virus total, and they'll run it against all the top antivirus software. And then if it comes up clean, I don't know that I want to use it, because an anomaly-based IDS go, hey, I've never seen anything like that. I wonder what it is. So instead, find out how they classify their attacks, and maybe 1 is high risk and 5 not so bad. What is a low risk attack? Oh, it's when it has like spam, and you put in some. You insert the signature for a spam in your malware, so it's not like the IDS goes, "Hey, that's clean. I wonder what it is." It goes, "Nah, I know what that is." Wrong, sucker. Again, something you thought you knew turned out to be wrong. So I like that very much, to these insertion attacks, very, very crafty. All right, keystroke monitoring said only done in special cases. If you are going to monitor people, you better work with legal and HR to make sure you're not breaking the law. You would not, for example, I understand, monitor HIPAA data. Cannot do that. So it should be in your policy. Should is a guideline, but it shall be explained in a banner, and that's a standard. Intruders like to cover the tracks. It said logging to write once media will help it, improve the validity of it. And again, if you're going to use it in court, it's going to come under a lot of scrutiny. They when somebody subpoenas you, and to say you log internet access, and if you are saying, I'm going to prove that Bob was doing inappropriate usage, here's the log that proved what he did. They're allowed to go, wait a minute, you can't target people, right? You didn't log just Bob, did you? No, we log everybody. Okay, we want to see that log. So you gotta be careful. All right, security testing. This is back where we were. Oh yeah, you're right. The exact slides are here. Sorry about that. All right, so I definitely got to clear this up. So we really talked about this stuff. Yeah. For scanning, cover their tracks. It was reconnaissance. Look at this. Maybe you had something bad on your website. I should take that down, dude. You should leave that up there. Oh, okay, I took it down. What happens in Vegas stays at the archives. Watch this. This is just, if you haven't seen archive.org, I'll show you what my website looks now. All right, this is us. Internet Network Defenses, bridging the past to the future. My four-dimensional view, right? I try to stretch it. I just think like my brother. My brother thinks about today and tomorrow. I'm thinking about the ancient past and the future. All right, so now go to the archive. Oh, I want to go to archive.org. Actually, let me keep that up. Oh, now you saw it. Okay, archive.org. And try the new site. Oh, no. Look at that. Oh, I'm going to have to enable some scripts and everything here. They're not just doing this, by the way. A lot of movies and stuff that the copywriters written out are there. I got the movie Top Hat from there. Old Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers movie, but whatever. Big Fred Astaire. All right, so they have 381 versions of my website, starting here. I can go any one of these. Let's see what I look like back then. Let's see. That's a lot different than that. Now, apparently, if you know there's sensitive data there, you can contact the archives. I'm a member of the archive, actually, so I can get those movies. And they'll remove it. But if you don't know, if you're not aware is your number one countermeasure. If you're not aware it's there, then you can't do anything about it. You can't defend yourself. It's pretty cool stuff. Mike, I think we were working together when I registered that name. This was, look, it's October 2001. Or I just left. I think I just left. All right, Netcraft is always scanning you. You don't have to scan somebody for some basic stuff. Netcraft scans them. This is Netcraft scanning me. They know. They used to get more information. Look, back in 2003, they knew it was Linux on Apache. Nice. Blue teams are doing vulnerability assessment. Red teams are doing, oh gosh, I gotta get a red of Star Trek red teams. Red teams are doing the pen test, the black box test. Maybe they're emulating an outsider. Maybe they're emulating a business partner. Maybe they're emulating an employee, somebody without full administrative access. So that's a gray box test. They have some knowledge. I've only done, for the most part, clear box tests, only they changed the name from clear to white. I can't see through white either, but whatever the case, white box test is when they have full administrative knowledge. Right? This is an old version of Nmap. I like to show because everything's on one screen here. So the old GUI here. And it can send any combination of ICMP message types, UDP port numbers, TCP ports, or flag combinations and more, just to see the look on your face. Now, I said to get a denial of service, I don't use my real IP. But if I'm going to do a scan, I need to use my IP. There's a couple ways around that. One way, I needed one packet back. I sent out 10,000 with 9,999 spoofed IPs. That's one way to do it. Another way, what's my time here? We're getting actually to the end. So for the day, we're going to end up pretty early today. So I want to get a little technical on you. Remember IP IDs? Oh, I can even show you what I taught Laura Chappell. So it's back to that performance problem I had. Continue saving. I went slow. It's a really big conversation. So this is a real problem I have. Now, one thing you can do in Wireshark's pretty cool. If a field isn't normally used, there's the ID field. I don't see it for anything, but I might want to use it. I might want to use it in this case. I'm just going to apply it as a column. So now I've got the ID field. Oops. Hey. Come on. Stretch that so you can see that a little better. All right, so these are the IP IDs. And then remember I said I like to sort by the delay. Now, first, where's my sort by number? All right, so here's the SYN and the SYN-ACK. All right, so when I said SYN, it was 28030. They said SYN-ACK, and my next one was 28033. That's awfully close. The ID field can be a random number, but random number generators take some CPU. So most IP stacks don't really use a random number. Again, this is only for fragment reassembly. This is only to make sure that every fragment has the same ID. So instead, most IP stacks will start with a counter. They just count up. So I got a feeling I'm a counter. How about them? They said a SYN-ACK, it was 10.107.80. The next time I heard from them, oops, it was 107.84. All right, I got a feeling they're using a counter too, right? All right. Oh man, I hate the way this thing is grabbing with me. Back over here. All right, now let's find that time where I had that long delay, that 116-second delay. And there's 10 seconds, 12-second delay, 50-second. Where's that big one? There it is, right here. So I got a packet from them, and let's make sure we can see their IP address so we know who we're talking about. I've done that before. I have done analysis and freaked out on a customer, and I flipped the source and destination address and realized a problem was on our side, not their side. Oh, yeah, I told you I'm not the Uber security guy. I'm as dumb as anybody. All right, so I had gotten a packet from them, and then it was 116 seconds before I got the next packet. So this is encrypted. I don't know what's going on here, but I equated this with, it's probably a get from me going, hey, do you have any guitars in stock? And they go, let me see, sir. And 116 seconds later, they said yes or no. All right. But look at the ID fields. They sent me a packet here, and the ID was 13404. The next time they spoke to me, it was a long way away. So I got a feeling when I said, do you have any guitars in stock? They said, let me see. And they walked around and asked a lot of questions. And this is supposed to be a dedicated server to this one application. It should not have been handling other people for this. So I was able to prove the thing was talking to something else. Probably a SQL server. It could be a DNS and then a SQL server. Well, I actually learned this from Han-Sung Bae. I told you about he works for Riverbed. He's the director of the pilot program. He's like one of the best Wireshark guys in the world. And I got to do some work for him. And he showed me this trick. And then I took Laura Chappell's WCNA program. I showed her this, and she goes, wow. And I was like, yes, I taught Laura Chappell something. That usually I would teach her. All right, let's finish this up. So now, think about these sequence numbers now, all right? Now, if you're busy, it isn't going to work, so you need to be idle. I need an idle machine. That's why this is called an idle scan. I want to see what your sequence numbers are, what your, ID fields are. So I send you a SYN on port 80. You're not a web server. So you ACK reset back to me. I'm not a web server, and I'd reset. I don't care. And I just examine the ID field. Let's pick an easy number. It's at 1,000. I SYN again. It goes 1,001. And I go, all right, he's a counter. That's not a random number generator. Good. Now I want to know if Felipe's a mail server. So I'm going to say, Mike, you're going to be the guy who's the idle machine that obviously is a counter. I'm going to use you to make it to find out if Felipe is a web server. Yeah, or mail server. So I'm going to send a SYN on port 25 to Felipe's machine and spoof Mike's source IP. Well, if Felipe is a web server or a mail server, SMTP, he's going to SYN ACK. And Mike's going to go, I never asked for that. So Mike will ACK reset him, and now the counter just went from 1,001 to 1,002. But if Felipe's not a mail server, he's going to ACK reset, and no one answers a reset, so Mike wouldn't have said anything. So then I scan Mike again. I send a SYN, and if Mike is at 1,002, then Felipe didn't answer him. Felipe's not a mail server. But if Mike went to 1,003, Felipe very well could be. As long as no one else was talking to you, why did it increment? If you were truly idle, I just proved that Felipe was up, and I did not use my source IP to Felipe. Did that make sense, everybody? It's an idle scan. All right, a little tricky there. I might have to come up with a graphic to review you guys tomorrow because it could show up on your test. Perfect sense for Felipe. You may have done this. It sounds like you've got a lot of IP knowledge. Some people here might be great in business continuity and kick butt on the test, but be missing to this. Felipe, I'm going to ask you stress business continuity because that's where my network guys always miss that one. All right, let's just get out of here. We're almost done here. So I can do all kinds of stuff. Now this is an older version. It'll guess the operating system. Banner grabbing is if I just say telnet to port 80 and you're a web server, you might come back. Internet IIS or Microsoft IIS. How can I help you? And it gives me that. My goal is to identify what's up and what are they. Here's a newer version, ZenMap. And we scan to find unauthorized hosts, vulnerable services on a host, any services that were not supposed to be there. It helps you prepare for the pen test. Again, how would you know if your IDS works if you don't fire attacks? And it helps you collect forensics evidence. If it's listening on port 666, I'll bet it was part of that problem. So we try to investigate disconnect. And again, we know if we can't prevent, we'll detect, but we're going to do our best to try and either turn it off or at least modify perimeter routers or firewalls to control it somewhat. Vulnerability scan is actually going to do a lot. All these Nessus and Nexpose and Retina and LandGuard, they all do Nmap type scans. In fact, Nessus does Nmap. But they also have a database of known vulnerabilities. So when we went to the National Vulnerability Database, the MITRE database, let's just look at something real quick here. Of course, nothing is quick with the National Vulnerability Database, is it? All right, there it goes. Vulnerabilities. And I'll just go just find out what happened today. So already we just found some. Look at that. Android does not verify XF 509, which allows man-in-the-middle attacks. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that is common vulnerability and exposure 2015, the day 3610. Well, when you run Nessus against your phone now, it should be looking. Nessus is now building, or if it isn't already out, a check to see if this is there. To see if you, and if the issue is, it's going to be a patch or something, and they're going to, all right. So the vulnerability scanners will let you know by the CVE numbers. It's very cool. And again, it's not just the version. It could be a misconfiguration if you left your passwords blank. You got to go over. Now, there's an older version of Nessus, but I just got a kick out of this in terms of understanding tools have limits. So this thing said I got a red alert. Oh my God, what is it? Oh no, it's one of my IP cameras. It's a synopsis able to determine the exact time. Oh no, it's red. It's red alert. Solution filter risk factor. None. I don't know what's wrong here. Should that have said hi? Or should that not have been read? And that's a very good lesson. These are tools that help you, but your tools could be wrong. I could get on a scale and says that I weigh 200 pounds. I know it's wrong. Your tool, you're right, so you got to calibrate your tools and stuff. But it's almost always a config or a patch issue. And patches break stuff. So we got to be very proactive in our patch management system as much as possible. Somebody's got to be monitoring the CVEs at your job and then initiating changes where they see it's appropriate. Oh, this applies to us. Let's start testing things. Log reviews we already beat up. And you know, the IDSs are nothing but logging servers. War dialing, they look on tests for insecure modems, but I mentioned my red team guys love the multifunction fax, printer fax. Now, I used to do a lot of work with lawyers, and LexisNexis took a while to get onto the web, and every lawyer needs to dial LexisNexis. LexisNexis never dials the lawyer. So if you can't get rid of it, see if you can block inbound calls. A lot of people think modems are gone. I'll bet you your network operations guys still got a lot of modems out there, because if a WAN link goes down, that's how I got to remotely get in there to administer it. Penetration testing, you're actually going to try to exploit the vulnerability. This can get very dangerous. I might bring down a server. I've made printers print a bunch of junk and DOS that printer. So we're going to be very careful. Designed to simulate attacks and tools that might be illegal, well, you better be careful with that one. And if you don't have formal permission, that's not really a penetration test. That's called breaking and entering or something. All right, most important administrative controls. You have to document what's expected here. The rules of engagement. What can you do? What can you not do? What IP addresses should be tested? And Clement says, you better validate the IP addresses, Larry. The customers don't always know what they have. Are there any restricted hosts within that range? What techniques? So again, I wouldn't test for a distributed denial of service vulnerability. I'm going to guess that I am. I might test for a DOS vulnerability, because people do try to DOS your logging servers. Because if somebody can break your logging servers, you're not logging the event, and it makes it tough to correlate. Like if they can DOS the time server, then these logs might not be considered competent. When is the test over? When can you test? Like it might be if you're a trading company, probably not during trading hours. And the IP addresses of the machines from which pen testing will be conducted. Think about how many times somebody is trying to break into you. If you don't realize it, if you didn't know, I had a guy as far back as 2010. There was a network manager for a Fortune 100 company. My girlfriend doesn't like me saying live. I say Scott Paper because they're gone. But this is a Fortune 100 company, and he said 70% of the traffic that hits the outside interface is invalid, and it comes from China, or appears to. Source IP addresses associated with China. Points of contact, and just like if you're sparring, if I accidentally get hurt, who should you call? Measures to prevent law enforcement, right? and you generally have what's sometimes called the get out of jail free card. It's not the it's technically your written permission, but Ralph pointed something out to me for the day. He goes, notice it's not called the don't go to jail card. A mutual friend of ours was caught doing a pen test, and they had the written permission. And when the guards, it was a physical break-in, and when the guards caught him, he said, we're supposed to be here, and he gives them the card, and they call, and guy doesn't answer. They called the police and had him locked up. And I understand that they did get the bill for the time they spent in jail. Most important, though, what are you going to do with that information? You better do something. You better do something with it, because before you may have had the vulnerability and something went wrong, but now you knew you had the vulnerability. And let me show you something that's pretty funny. This is Marcus Rainham, works for Tenable, where they make Nessus now. He helped create the first firewall. Very, very respected person in this field. Marcus Rainham, and his opinion of pen testing. And he believes it sucks. Now, this was a little grand, he was debating Bruce Schneier for a magazine, so he just took the other side. But I like it. He says it's a great idea if you're a pen tester. Other than that, serious problems. He said the real problem with pen testing is it tests your operations. It doesn't test, you should test your design. And it never tells you have good security, you have a badness-o-meter. At one end it says it sucks, the other one you don't know. And it goes on, I'm not going to read the whole thing. But he said, do you know who gets the suckiest reports? The ones with bad managers. Do you know what bad managers do with the reports? They stick them on the shelf. And then later on, when something does go wrong, didn't your organization have a penetration test done last year? May we see it? So you knew going back 11 months that you had, quote, a critical series of flaws that could lead to a substantial leakage of personally identifiable information, end quote. And you elected to do nothing. That could be really bad. So if you get one, that you better do something. Now, that's not just lawyers. Hackers would love to get a hold of all the hard work's done. All right, so they come in. We can go through this really quick. They come in, they gain access, they escalate their privileges, they browse around, they install more stuff. Sometimes called pivoting the attack. I had to teach this for the EC Council. They call it, most people call it pivoting. If you got your CEH, which was the word they wanted you to know? It's been a year and a half since I had to teach that. Oh, whatever. But most people in real life, they'll call it pivoting the attack. So you get on one machine, and then you found a way to another machine. Like maybe you came in through the shared fax modem, you got on there, and from there you got onto a syslog server. Well, you clean up your access from the other one, and you do the rest of your stuff from the syslog server and stuff like that. They've actually got tools. Anybody here use Core Impact? I've never played with it, but I understand it does all that. Core, I think it's 2 words. Core Impact, and a lot of it does. You did at Canvas, okay, great, and right, it'll install stuff. It's pretty expensive, Core Impact, but it does quite a bit of stuff. Right, it'll pivot automatically. Right, and then the overall thing is the best reports are from Impact. Nice. All right, so before you get started, you document your rules of engagement, your test plans, your written permission, your get out of jail free card. It's not called a don't go to jail card. And periodically written reports and logs you found. And at the end, here's the tough part. Now, Peter Herzog has this thing called the OSTEM, Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual by Peter Herzog. I think that's how you spell his name. And Peter, the OSTEM is very well respected around the world, but I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of a simpleton. It's very complex for me to do all the risk assessment values and stuff. NIST just recommends a stoplight chart, a red, yellow, green type of thing. And I prefer those for me because I'm simple, but whatever. But you get a risk rating, and then something auditors are not allowed to do. So this would separate a pen test from an audit. You're allowed to give mitigation guidance. Here's what I would do. You're going to need to do this. Or some, you maybe not say who's firewall, but you got to get, a web application firewall. You got to look into WAFs. You guys remember what the WAF was, right? WAF, a web application firewall. I haven't seen that they talk about it, but I heard they talk about it in the test, but they certainly should be. These check for content. So where our other firewalls that are stateful inspection type thing, they're looking at contextual information. They're looking at the TCP header. They're looking at the IP header. They're looking at application headers, the SMTP header. But they're not looking at the content of the mail. WAFs are looking for invalid input attacks, particularly to servers. They're looking for SQL injections. They're looking for cross-site scripts. They're looking for buffer overflows. All right, so our goal is to fix it. You plan, do, check, act. We're checking so we can act, so we can improve. And most of our problems happen because of complexity, because the failure to follow procedures. Things weren't even configured right, but if I did, it's hard to do patch management. Configure is such a lesson in patch management. When we talk about malicious code tomorrow, we're going to talk about zero-day attacks. This is when the vulnerability was discovered, but there's no patch. Configure was 8 months after the fact. The patch was out for 8 months before the exploit code, but people don't patch enough. So as we're wrapping up, I just want to tell you, I took the Foundstone, the very first hacking class from Foundstone. It's called Hacking Exposed Hands-On. And I'm an ops guy, so I'm interested in this stuff, but my job is not breaking in. My job is keeping things running. And these guys are all like into the head. If they didn't apply to respect to you could do this, and you could. And I finally raised my hand. I go, I'm sorry, this might sound stupid, but are you telling me that none of these attacks work if I patched? He gets quiet. Yeah, but most people don't patch all that often. I hear you. But I'll be honest with you, I think my value to the organization is going to be greater to put in my time in patch management rather than learning the 50 million things I could do to you if you didn't patch, because I don't see how that helps the business. I get a little hard on people. But, I come from I'm looking at my trading company going, I don't think I'd be of any value to them showing them all the different things I could do to them if they didn't patch. I think did you patch it, Larry? Good. So now I can do that? Good. Let's move on. Don't want to pick on people too much. All right, we're just wrapping up here. I think this is funny. This is from 842. It's not really real anymore. And I just like to read it because you can see the world we're in. So they broke everything up into 2 categories. You had your critical infrastructure, Cat 1, and then you had your laptops where everything is Cat 2. And they recommended that on Cat 1 devices, you do scanning continuously. I like that. Vulnerability scanning, quarterly or bi-monthly, often for certain high-risk systems. When the vulnerability database is updated, that was a few times today. That's probably why they had to change this whole thing. But the other things, password cracking continuously. They did that to trading firm, always trying to crack. They ran John the Ripper continuously and probably still do. Integrity checkers, these are probably going to bump into Tripwire on your test. Tripwire is a hashing tool, and it'll check the, can't do it with temp files and doc files, but I can certainly do it with OS files. I can do it with DLLs and make sure they're not, config files they weren't tampered with. Virus detection, word dialing annually, but I want this job. I want a word drive continuously. I would just want to be paid to drive around in my car, listen to music. Hey, what are you doing, Granny? I'm working. All right. NIST has some basic design principles that I love. Keep it simple. I'm going to be one of these guys. I love all kinds of martial arts. I love mixed martial arts. I love it. But I'm going to be one of these guys. He couldn't beat your Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali kept it simple, really. I mean, he mostly jabbed. It's the best weapon. It's the best weapon. Fail safe. We know what that is. We know in physical security that probably means to fail open, right? Don't lock people in the building when it's burned down. But in logical security, probably means fail closed. Complete. Don't put a steel door on a straw house. Open design, that's what Marcus Raynham kept stressing. Let some third party go over your design. Don't do a pen test that tests your operations unless you first do this. They call separation of duty, separation of privilege. Psychologically acceptable, that's debatable. Microfilm would accept that they could make 85-year-old ladies take off their adult diapers at the TSA. I find that unacceptable. I don't know. We got to work this one out. A layer defense, or defense in depth. And when you hit the cliff under the water, a great way not to hit it again would be to keep a record of that, right? So we put a lighthouse there. If you don't learn from history, you're forced to repeat it. All right, finally, a little plug for Clement. Besides running csecure.org, Clement runs for professionalsecuritytesters.org. And it's hard to get, sample reviews on tools and sample get out of jail free cards, and here's a good place to go. So, I love Clement. He seems to be really dedicated to the Commonwealth. All right, guys, we all set. I know it's an early day. We had a long one the other day, so and a jam-packed yesterday. Everybody good? Hello? Did you guys walk away? All right, great. Good, best day yet? All right. Oh, I thought my network stuff would have been better, but crypto anyway. All right, great. Well, let's meet back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and it should be another shorter day tomorrow. All righty. Please send the link to the audio. I can't even get from. Oh! You mean the stuff that the videos that I sent? You need my Dropbox? Yeah, sure. Hold on. You want to listen to the birds for the rest of it? It's funny, I didn't think about it. And I got so used to them out there. I should open the window. I love my Florida. I'm not looking forward to leaving. I'll keep the house for a retirement place, but it looks like we're going back to Philly to send my kid to school there. Ay. Okay, right enough. Yeah, I hear them now. Awesome. Oh, is that right? Yeah, she came for, that's when we started becoming closer. She didn't know I had a crush on her. We've been working since 94. And I said, you didn't notice I flirted with you? And she said, no, you suck at flirting. Yeah, she took Windows 2000. She's a student. And she said the only reason she gave me a second look was the woman she was shacked up with thought I was cute. Yeah, she kept talking about you, so I thought, I don't know, maybe he's okay. L7? What's L7? No, I don't remember the L7 joke. Give me a hint. Should I? I'm gonna. I have to mute you. What was the L7? Oh, we got way too many people.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'll send you a note just to you instead of to the whole group.
Sounds good. One of those jokes. Oh, yes, yes. How do you want to make the broccoli now? Oh, I better mute before I yawn your guys' heads off. Some people like the birds in the background. The other dropout are PDF. I was thinking they should have they should be MP4s as well. Thanks, Felipe. Yeah, change that view and you'll see it. Yeah.